and then if you can switch them back to the other screen so that we've got the... Sorry, it's streaming now.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so I need to get that up on there.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Just leave me go to have taken the card, to be honest.
Oh, with this?
Yeah.
Do you want me in it?
Go on, yeah, why not?
This is ideal because no one wants a photograph of just like that.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, we will be.
Okay. Oh, we think we're streaming now.
We are streaming
Yeah.
now, yeah.
Cool. All righty. Yeah?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
See, to start with, this is the setting we've got to have. But if you want to go to, once you've done your presentation, you just have to switch the...
How do I move the slides? Right, and then I can move the slides on using it. Okay,
yeah.
great.
And then that obviously is going to the stream. And then if you want to go to camera afterwards, we'll just have to...
Well, you'll be here. You hang around. That'll be fine. Okay, hello everyone. Hello, let me call you to order. Listen, it's wonderful to see so many people here in Liverpool today, and it's wonderful to see those of you who are online. And we're starting very slightly late because we wanted to absolutely make sure that the people online could see us and hear us. So I very much hope you can, and great to see both of you. So my name's Gavin Costigan. I'm the Chief Executive of the Foundation for Science and Technology. Before I start, I should say we're incredibly grateful for Liverpool Hope University for hosting us today and for helping us put on this whole event. I'm also grateful to the Royal Commission for the Exhibition of 1851, who've also supported the event, which is fantastic. As far as I know, there are no fire alarms for today, so if the alarm goes, leave the building. That's always the best advice, isn't it? So this conference has been put together by the Foundation Future Leaders, and those are the people who spend a year working with the Foundation for Science and Technology, bringing together universities, government, industry, and understanding the sort of whole science and technology ecosystem. There's quite a lot of people in the room who are on the scheme this year, quite a few people who have been on the scheme in the past. There may be some of you in the room who are interested in joining the scheme in the future, which would be fantastic. So do chat to people, and if they've been on the scheme, ask them about it. Come and find me during the breaks, I'll tell you all about it. So it'd be great to get a conversation about leadership within science and technology during the course of the day and during the breaks. And a bit of a plug, the deadline for applying for next year's Future Leader Scheme is deliberately set as a few days after this conference. So if you're only hearing about this for the first time, you still have a little bit of time to put in your applications. So applications close on the 25th of November. But as I say, do come and have a chat and whatever. If you have any problems during the day, you get lost or stuck or whatever, come and find me. Come and find Charlotte, who's sitting there. She's about to put her hand up. Angela on the front desk outside, and Tobias, who actually works here. So between the four of us, we should hopefully know what's going on and point you in the right direction. But all of the talking bits are going to be in this room, and the lunch, which we'll tell you about, is next door. So that's all from me. That's my introduction. But I'm delighted to introduce Claire Azan, who's the Vice Chancellor here at Liverpool Hope. So Claire.
Thank you very much, Gavin, and a really warm welcome to those of you who are physically here at Hope and those of you who are joining us online. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you to the conference, Opportunities and Challenges in Science, Technology and Innovation. Liverpool Hope University is delighted to host this event, which brings together early and mid-career professionals from across universities, industry, government, and the wider research community, each of you contributing to the UK's dynamic landscape of science and innovation. This annual conference, organised by the 2025 Foundation Future Leaders, provides a valuable opportunity to exchange ideas and strengthen connections across sectors. I'd like to thank Gavin Costigan and the Foundation for Science and Technology for their continued leadership, and to congratulate the Future Leaders team for curating such a rich and relevant programme. We gather at a time of both great opportunity and pressing challenge for science and technology. Across the UK and globally, research is driving progress in fields such as artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and health technologies, transforming the way we live and work. Yet alongside this rapid progress come important questions. How do we ensure that innovation benefits all regions and all communities? How do we foster a research culture that values integrity, inclusivity, and collaboration as much as excellence? And how do we create a sustainable investment and sustainable partnerships that allow science and innovation to flourish long term? These are exactly the kind of conversations this conference was designed to encourage. Our first plenary focuses on the role of place in shaping science and technology policy and how devolution within the UK changes that discussion. At Liverpool Hope University, we see the power of place every day, how regional partnerships, community engagement, and local creativity can drive innovation that makes a real difference. If we connect regional strengths with national priorities, we can build a research and innovation system that is both excellent and equitable. The second plenary will explore barriers to successful science and technology, from funding models to research culture. These challenges are real, but they are not insurmountable. Through collaboration across sectors and disciplines, we can begin to remove those barriers and build stronger foundations for the future. Later on, the breakout sessions will look at the role of science and technology in health, energy and AI, areas of huge social importance. And of course, we look forward to hearing from Professor David Nutt, whose keynote will bring valuable insights on how science and innovation can inform policy. I want to take a moment to celebrate the Foundation Future Leaders who've made today possible. Over the past year, they've engaged with senior figures across academia, government and industry, building networks and insight that will serve them and all of us well into the future. As we begin today's discussions, I encourage you to think boldly, collaborate widely, and listen generously. The challenges ahead, whether in sustainability, technology, or public policy, will be solved not just by new discoveries, but by the partnerships and shared purpose that bring those discoveries to life. So on behalf of Liverpool Hope University, I wish you an inspiring and productive day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Just a very quick one from me. My name is Charlotte Glass. I'm Head of Evaluation at the Science and Technologies Facilities Council, and this morning have the lucky job of thanking you, our attendees, on behalf of the 2025 cohort of Future Leaders. Claire has done an amazing job of giving you an overview of our programme. I hope you have received the details of the timing and the locations, etc. For the moment, though, I have the very lovely job of handing over to Dr. Tobias Trowinski, a senior lecturer here in cognitive psychology here at Liverpool Hope, who will be our chair for our first plenary session.
Yes.
Hello, thanks a lot, Charlotte. Yeah, it's great to have you all here. Very welcome to the participants online. We are starting with the fantastic session. I'm very grateful to our speakers to be here. And in this plenary, we'll speak about the regional and technological regional science and technology, achievements and the challenges. And our first speaker will be Professor Richard Jones, who is the Emeritus Professor of Materials Physics and Innovation Policy, a former Vice President for the Regional Innovation and Civic Engagement from the University of Manchester. He was Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at Sheffield from 2009 to 2016, and was a member of the EPSRC Council from 2013 to 2018, and chaired the Research England Technical Advisory Group for the Knowledge Exchange Framework. He was a member of the Sheffield Manchester Industrial Strategy Commission and has written extensively about the science and innovation policy. And such as, for example, the Missing 4 Billions, making the research and development work for the whole UK, and the Science and Innovation Policy for Hard Times, the overview of the UK's research and development landscape. Professor Jones, over to you.
Thank you.
That should hopefully have a nice picture. Oh. Yes, there you go.
There we are. Great, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to talk about this subject, which I think is very important, and it's really great that this first session is about this, because I think it addresses some of the real challenges that the UK faces right now. And at the risk of being depressing, I want to start off by saying something about this national context. And I think the first thing to stress, I think the most important thing that's happened in the last, in a sense, the most important thing that hasn't happened in the last 20 years has been the stagnation in productivity. So economic productivity growth, after several decades of a steady increase at about 2.3%, in the mid-2000s that changed. And since then, productivity growth has been much weaker. It's slowed down. We're currently about 27% lower than in productivity than if that pre-global financial crisis trend had continued. And it's interesting to see the newspapers over the last few weeks. There was kind of a whole weird bunch of briefings and counter briefings from the Treasury about, is the Office of Budgetary Responsibility going to downgrade its productivity forecast? This illustrates how important this question is. It's slightly bonkers that it's turned up it's turned up in that particular manifestation. So in a sense, what we've got, the Office of Budgetary Responsibility is in fact only just waking up to the fact that probably should have been obvious for at least the last decade, which is that something dramatic happened to the UK economy in the mid-2000s that's caused its productivity performance to fall really quite dramatically. Okay, productivity sounds like it's a very abstract economic concept, but it has really crucial consequences, the most important of which is that it's pretty much directly coupled to wages. So since the direct consequence of productivity growth stagnating, is that wages have flatlined. So wages have flatlined since about 2008, and it shows up in fiscal difficulties. So everything that we read about governments, successive governments, finding it difficult to fund public services at the level that people expect, everything comes back down to productivity and why productivity has failed to grow. So in a sense, I think everything that's currently wrong with the economy and politics comes down to this productivity issue. And there's a really profound regional dimension to this, because the productivity performance across the country is very, very uneven. The UK is an outlier amongst developed countries in terms of how big the productivity disparities are across the country. So in a sense, what we have is we have in the greater southeast of the UK, we have an economy that looks like a perfectly normal Northern European economy. Outside the greater southeast, economic performance looks more like Southern Europe. And to some extent, this is masked by the fact that the UK is it's a fiscal union. In a sense, huge sums of money are being transferred from the southeast to keep public services going in the rest of the country. And there's a really important dimension to this. My colleague at Manchester, Phil McCann, has been very effective at demonstrating this. The UK is a very unusual economy in that its second cities really underperform. So in most countries, we expect big cities to be the drivers of the economy. Agglomeration is what economists call this. So if we look in Europe, Munich, Antwerp, Lyon, these are cities that drive their national economies. The UK, that's not the case. All the second cities in the UK actually have productivity that's lower than the UK average. So weirdly, the cities that ought to be driving the economy of the country are not. If you look at Manchester, if you look at Liverpool, since we're here, the comparable cities in Europe to Manchester and Liverpool are Palermo and Leipzig. So we have a very, very divided country. We have second cities that are not working and are not driving productivity. So if we come back and say, where does productivity come from? Well, economists tell us that it comes from innovation in the broader sense of that word. Economists talk about total factor productivity, which is the productivity after you've accounted for the capital inputs. So it's about innovation. Research and development is not the only source of innovation, but it's a pretty major one. And so private sector R&D in particular is a driver of innovation. Now, private sector, economists also tell us that the private sector will always systematically underinvest in research and development. The reason for this is well understood. It's because firms cannot capture all the benefits of the research and development that they do. And that's the argument that's accepted even by the Treasury for why the government ought to invest in research and development. So and this has been conventional wisdom since, in fact, the kind of mid-19th century, actually. So the idea that the government has to invest in R&D to support private sector in innovation is exceptionally well known. Now here's where the problem comes. In the UK, R&D, the support that we give for R&D, it's highly geographically concentrated in the regions, in the parts of the country that are already the most prosperous and have the highest productivity. So in a sense, the UK's government R&D policy has been an anti-regional policy for really quite a long time. So the greater southeast, if you take London, the southeast and the east of England, it's got 36% of the UK's population, but it gets 55% of the R&D spending. So if we look at London in public R&D spending in London is £535 per person. In the northwest, where we are now, it's 222. In the northeast, it's a little bit more at 265. Wales actually does pretty much the worst apart from Northern Ireland. Wales, it's £203. So we have this anti-regional policy, if you like. Why does this matter? It matters because public money attracts private money and geography matters. I mean, people still say, well, it doesn't matter where you do the R&D because the benefits spread out. But no, innovation is something that's done by people. People live in places and clusters matter. You know, Alfred Marshall knew about this 100 years ago. So, give you a really compelling example from the Northwest. AstraZeneca a few years ago moved their R&D centre out of the Northwest, out of Cheshire, to Cambridge. Why did they do that? Because they were able to benefit from the huge public investment that has gone into research and development in Cambridge. There are people there's skilled people, there's lots of talented people. So we've been operating this anti-regional strategy. So what should we do about it? So Tom Forth and I wrote a paper in 2000 called The Missing 4 Billion, which kind of analysed this and looked at some of the reasons. The reasons, it's a bit of a mixture. Part of this is a kind of unintended consequences. People talk about the Matthew effect. Places that are good at doing science tend to attract more money to do yet more, and that's a natural thing. There are also some deliberate decisions, so a series of capital decisions were made, particularly in the 2010s, which reinforced this. And our argument was that nothing would change unless we did things differently. How would we do things differently? Our argument again was you'd need to do some devolution. You'd need some element of local and regional involvement in decision making. But if I said this if I went to Swindon or Carlton House Terrace and say, well, we need to devolve R&D funding, I'd always get the pushback. Well, we can't do that. Okay, we agree in principle, but honestly, I can't. We couldn't be giving this money to cities because they just kind of waste the money because they don't understand how to do that. And I think that there's some truth to that. So if you accept the argument that regional government, subnational government can't make good decisions because they don't have the capacity, then you have to build that capacity. And so in Manchester, this was the logic that was our thinking for creating an organisation called Innovation Greater Manchester. We thought, okay, let's get together the private sector, the public sector, R&D institutions and local and regional government, join that up so we've got some capacity to make decisions about what kind of R&D we would need in our region to boost our own economy. So I think this innovation theorists call this the triple helix. So you need to have the private sector there, arguably private sector in the lead because it's the productivity growth. Productivity growth is going to come from private sector firms that are creating new products and processes to create new value. But you do need those public sector R&D institutions, particularly universities, because that's where the expertise is. And then you do need local and regional government too. And of course, there's a great advantage of doing this at a regional level, which is that you can join up the many different functions that local and regional government bring. So planning is important if you're creating new development sites. So for example, in Greater Manchester, there's a development site around Rochdale and Bury called Atom Valley. You can really bring in all the planning, the transport, the skills dimension. And I think the skills dimension is something particularly important. And I'd say this because I think it's something that central government does really badly. Anybody I ever talk to in central government will immediately admit that there is no connection between the Department for Education and the Department of Business and Trade or the Department or DCIT. So the fact that in a city region or indeed a developed nation you can actually get the further education colleges, particularly because I think there's a particularly important dimension to those kind of technical skills into this innovation conversation, that's vital. So where have we got to? Well, the previous government did bring in an innovation accelerator pilot with £100 million for Greater Manchester, Glasgow and West Midlands. I think that pilot programme has been successful. We're now starting up with a local innovation partnership fund with 500 million for 7 English cities and 1 city in each of Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. But the issues still are, these are still small-scale interventions. In the context of a £20 billion government R&D budget, this is still small. I think that we're still waiting to see how this is going to map on to the patchy nature of English devolution. I think Greater Manchester is in a pretty good place here. I think Liverpool's not bad either. I think there are other city regions or new strategic mayoral authorities where these capacity issues are still a problem. It's still slightly uncomfortable how this all works in the context of the devolved nations, and maybe I'll get some comments on that. I think how UKRI thinks about place is still, it doesn't come naturally to them. I think there's still work to be done there. And then the focus so far has been on city agglomeration economies. And I think that's probably right from the economics point of view, but it still leaves the question, what happens to deindustrialised towns? What do you do for Rochdale or Merthyr? What do you do for coastal and rural peripheries, you know, Blackpool or Pembroke Dock or wherever? But often really, really underperforming and very difficult economic situations in those places. So I think we've got to a place where the importance of place and the region has been recognised in innovation policy. It's part of the conversation about devolution, but there's still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is getting ready. It's Gareth Cross, Deputy Director of Science, Research and Evidence from Welsh Government. Gareth is current, as I said, current Deputy Director Science for Research and Evidence for Welsh Government, as well as the co-director of the Health and Care Research Wales. Gareth has spent 6 years in the government evaluating the impact and value of scientific evidence on health policy, including working on programs such as the transition of NWIS to the new Special Health Authority for Digital Health. Gareth, over to you.
Thank you very much. What a first presentation to follow on from, which is really stark in its facts and some of the challenges that we still face. Now, it would be amiss today if I didn't give you a little teaching lesson about devolution as well, which I'm going to as well, to sort of set the seed around some of those challenges. And when we talk about things at a UK level, a devolved level from a nation perspective, but I'm not going to go into city or region devolution because I admit that I know nothing about it, but I'm sure Mike will be able to give us much more on that. So the question I've sort of thought about for today as we come here is how can we as devolved nations contribute to, or how are we going to deliver the UK modern industrial strategy and the sector plans, like the life sciences sector plan, which I'm going to concentrate on. After all, I'm coming to you from health and care, science and research in Welsh Government, so that is my bread and butter. So the teaching for devolution, it's not a new thing, devolution. It's been around for a long time in many different guises, and certainly in Wales, even before we had formal devolution, the health service in Wales, even though it was part of the UK government, was run quite separately and run from within Cardiff. So none of this is really new. And we've got 4 parliaments and governments across the UK. We've obviously got the UK government and Parliament in Westminster. We've got Senedd Cymru in Cardiff, which is the Welsh Parliament. We've got the Scottish Parliament up in Edinburgh, and then we've got the Northern Ireland Executive that sits in Stormont. They're really important institutions, the devolved nations. And it's important there I say devolved nations or devolved governments, because a lot of people call them administrations, but I think that's always a touchy thing in government, because they're not administrations, they are governments. They are formed by an act. For example, in Wales, we've got the Government of Wales Act. So it's really important that we recognise that we're not just some adjunct of UK government, they are real governments that have been voted through referendums from the choice of the people. So it's really important that we set that scene as we go on to things that are devolved. So there's some really important things that we call reserved when we talk about devolved politics and devolved responsibilities, and they're the things that are done at a UK level and decided at a UK level. And there's 3 ones there that, despite the devolution settlements between the nations being really different, those are 3 things that are on there that are really important. And then in Wales, one of the really big things that's devolved is health and social care on there. There's that further list, and on there is economic development as well at the bottom. But health and social care is really important. So the health and well-being of people in Wales is the sole responsibility of the Welsh ministers. Okay, so the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care in the UK, who is the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care for England, has no responsibility of the health and well-being of the people in Wales. That's huge. And before the pandemic, people didn't really understand in Wales the impact of that. And then when we went into the pandemic and there was different decisions being taken in Wales and different challenges, people suddenly realised, oh gosh, actually it is all about Cardiff Bay, and it is all about Welsh people. And I think that was a bit of an education for the people of Wales as well around devolution. But it won't surprise you that there are colleagues in UK government, there are colleagues in industry, there are colleagues in academia that do not understand that basic principle about devolution. And that applies to cities and regions in many different policy areas as well. So this is a really important thing for everyone to get their head round in industry, in UK government wider, in our different bodies, in academia, everywhere, the public, is how important this is, okay, for how we make decisions about tackling those issues that Richard has highlighted in his input. So, the UK Modern Industrial Strategy, I won't talk about it too much, it's huge. If you want to talk about it in detail, we probably need a whole week to go through bits and bobs of the UK Industrial Strategy. It focuses on these really important points around there, and obviously the really important one there that I've highlighted is the enhancing regional growth and strengthening the UK's economic security and resilience. There's lots of things that have contributed to this, but I think something that hasn't been mentioned much in this strategy and in other things is the nurse review that was conducted by Paul Nurse. And actually that was a really important review, and it doesn't get talked about much these days, but it was really stark on some of the challenges that we've got, and especially around some of those points that Richard has raised about the sometimes over-reliance on centralisation and how that is hampering innovation. So actually regional growth and looking at what we're doing outside of the traditional centres of RD&I is really important. And then we've got the UK Life Sciences Sector Plan. Now this one is obviously a bit more spicier because when we talk about life sciences and health and care research, this is really devolved, okay? So the responsibility for this in Wales is very separate and different to that in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. So it's interesting that we have a UK life sciences sector plan with different governments responsible with different problems. And this is where some of the problems for our region approach probably start to come in. But saying that, there are things that we can align to. And I've put a little thing at the bottom there is that you'll notice if you read the life sciences sector plan, it talks a lot about UK government missions and the health missions. That's the health mission for England. It's not the health mission for Wales. In Wales, we've got a Healthier Wales, which is our strategic long-term plan for health and social care, which does mirror quite a lot of the elements of the 10-year mission in England, but ours is 8 years old and says the same thing. So you could say we're ahead of the curve in Wales. Ask me again in 2 years when we can evaluate where we've got to with that plan as well. So, shared priorities for life sciences, really important, 2 things. There are lots of shared priorities, but these are the 2 important things which I think talks to some of that regional and commercial development. So we've got the 150-day target to set up trials. This is really important. This is being pushed back from industry around having a place where in the UK, drug companies, pharmaceutical companies can set up trials quickly and get them going to progress their business. This is really challenging because you've got to balance medical safety with trials as well and what you're doing, but we need to have a playground where industry can work quickly and we can attract them in. So this is something that all 4 nations are quite aligned on here. This is a really important thing. And the legislative basis for doing this is where it gets complicated, is a reserved matter because medicine's safety and efficacy is reserved. It's one of the very few things, and that's looked after by the MRHA. So there were some really important UK levers that need to be pulled to enable this, but then in our separate nations, this is really important because we all have different strengths that we can do to attract the pharmaceutical industry and that we can play to actually make the UK a really attractive economical playground for industry. And then we've got the Health Data Research Service, and I mentioned this one specifically because linked data for research is really tricky in the UK. And Wales, I will say this, is light years ahead of everyone else. probably not like as head of Scotland, but they're nipping at our heels. What we've invested in Wales through Swansea University, through the SAIL data linkage project, and what they've developed in terms of technology for linked data through their SERPs platform, which is being used globally. It's being used by authorities in Australia and other countries. It is the basis for the linked data system in Northern Ireland as well. We've played a really important role. So Wales has a really important role to play in the development of the Health Data Research Service, and actually being responsible and being a lead for the development of that technology. So we have a place. This is where, out on the rims of Wales, we can contribute to something on a UK basis and actually make us world leaders for secure data for research. Now, some of the challenges. So I put in bold there, which I've already talked to a bit, around how do you deliver a sector plan that's based on an English plan on a UK level in the different regions in the devolved nations. And that can cause challenges. I think Richard's point around the UKRI and that place-based approach is still in development, and I think it's still learning and growing. And it's really important that we work really closely with our colleagues in the UK government, UKRI, to develop that. But making a case to fund and develop capacity or things in Wales which don't align with the UK missions is really hard because we're small. We're 3.2 million people. But that is our challenge that we have to take on. And it's also really difficult to pull funding away from institutions in England, in those anchor institutions. They have that multiplier effect. They, as Richard said, they do good science, they do good research, they attract more good science research. But it doesn't mean they're doing the best science, okay? It doesn't mean that it's the highest quality, because that can be done in other places, it can be done in smaller places. But we need to make sure that we build the capacity and the capability for those smaller places to also succeed and be able to contribute, and to actually build that innovation landscape across our country, that different thought, diverse thought. In Wales, as Richard pointed out as well, we're not very good at our R&D funding necessarily, and the Welsh universities are probably in greater trouble than the universities in Scotland and England as well with their funding. So they don't have the capacity and the time to be putting people into writing bids and capturing things. So that is our challenge that we need to address. And I've made that point around Welsh universities as well. So we talk about strengths. What can we do? One of the things that I'm always talking about in the things that we have to do is being really, really clear about what we need from a policy and from a country perspective. What do we need for our Welsh economy? We need to be really clear about that. We need to be really clear about what we're genuinely good at. The risk is always that we try and promote everything, and what we water down is what we're truly good at. And we are truly good at some really amazing things in Wales that no one talks about. A lot of people talk about SAIL and SERP, and this is really a really great thing. We're truly good at it, but we need to be a bit more clear about the broad assets of things that we've got, and have some home truths about, are we just doing something and copying something poorly that's happening elsewhere, or are we really truly leading in something world leading, European leading? And that's what we need to concentrate on. We need to make sure we've got a joined up approach across our life cycle as well, in Wales and wider. Are we contributing something in Wales, say in basic research, which is leading on to some massive multi-million-pound investment or innovative scale that might be happening in England or Scotland or internationally? And we need to be able to link those together much more for industry and other partners, so we can show our value as a region and a nation in that, and having excellent communication strategies. So I'm going to talk about this. This is something really interesting that came up. You might have seen it in the news. Did anyone see this story in the news? It was like the BBC's top charting story for like 3 days. Fascinating story. Those of you who read it, fantastic story. Researchers from UCL were interviewed. Some patients from London and the regions around there that have had absolutely life-changing results from this drug trial. Really, really impressive work by UCL recruiting those patients. And I did a little search on Google to see the analytics around Huntington's disease globally. So when this news story came out, you can see the little peak on there of interest over time that was around those days when that news story came out. Global impact, right? From this story about a trial where UCL recruited these patients to this drug trial. Isn't that amazing impact? Do you know there is only one place in the UK where you can have direct brain into brain therapies, where they literally inject these drugs into your brain? There's only one place in the UK. Do you know where it is? Wales. Yes, it is. It's Cardiff University. We have the only centre in the UK, and only one of two, I think, in Europe. Okay? There is nowhere on any of this coverage, news coverage, that all of the patients that were recruited in the UK were treated in Cardiff. So communication really matters. That's not to downplay the role of the UCL or the company in this, because actually there was a group effort of putting this trial together and recruiting patients. But the capability to do this cutting edge, amazing research was not in Cambridge, it wasn't in London, it wasn't in Edinburgh, it was in Cardiff. It was in Wales. And that was funded, that capability, the centre that built that capability was funded by Welsh Government. It was funded by Health and Care Research Wales. And we still fund the centre that actually enables this research to happen. But it doesn't get mentioned. So that's our failure, right? That is my failure. We need to be better at making sure that we work with industry and our partners to highlight that government has invested in capability for industry. And industry needs to be able to recognise that, and industry needs to celebrate when we do get those successes, because it helps me in my arguments to my Cabinet Secretary and to the Welsh Ministers of investing more. So that's the end of my presentation. So I've got the questions there, and they've got 3 points, but I will end it at that point, because that's, I think, my shock point that, you know, we do amazing things in Wales, but we don't always talk about them.
Thank you very, very much. And let me introduce our next speaker, which is Liz Schad. Liz is a director at Insight Northeast, a policy hub created through the partnership between the region's universities, the Northeast Combined Authority, local government, and the NHS. Insight Northeast aims to connect Northeast policymakers to evidence in order to make a positive and the long-term impacts on people's life. It is supported by the investment of 2.78 million from the Research England development, and we'll hear from the Research England in this afternoon. Previously, Liz was the director of the policy for the University of Lincoln and the Greater Lincolnshire Local Enterprise Partnership, where she has worked to connect the university with the local and the national policy development. Prior to this, Liz had a well-established career in the higher education policy in the Universities UK and working to establish University Alliance as the new policy representative group in the sector. She has also worked for the Department for Work and Pension and Sheffield Hallam University. Liz, over to you.
So hello everyone, it's really great to be here and to have heard the two presentations we've had already. I'm going to change tact a little bit because, as has been said, the focus of Insights Northeast is not so much the importance of investment in research in our places and the spillover effect that those can have, but really thinking about how can we use the evidence that universities have within them to support better policy making at a regional level. So I'm going to talk about how that's been working for Insights Northeast. As has been said, we've been supported by Research England development funding, and we've really had 3 years of kind of acting as a demonstrator, if you like, and picking our way through how you do this in a very complex system, working with a really broad range of partners. So I'm going to talk through 3 challenges that we've had and share a bit of information about some of the ways in which we sought to overcome them. So kind of my first challenge, as I've sort of already alluded to, is the kind of layers of complexity. And as has been said, I've been working in policy sort of for over 20 years, and kind of I think increasingly what I understand about working in that space is that you kind of think you've pieced something together and then you have another conversation and it blows it up, and you kind of have to continually recalibrate. And at working at place and regional level, this is especially so. These are really rich systems with lots of players interacting with each other, and we're working across all of that. So when Insights North East was first set up, and the pitch that was given to Research England about how we might address some of these issues, really the kind of focus was on, well, how there's all this great research in the universities in the North East, huge public investment has gone into them, but it's not being accessed by the policymakers and the decision makers in the North East, and how can we connect those together? In a way, it was kind of seen as quite a linear problem. Kind of where we're kind of just trying to connect policy to research. And I think that basically as we've gone on, we've realised that the more that you look at the sky, the more stars you can see, and actually it's really a navigation problem. And also the starting point isn't so much the fact that there's all this evidence over here and there's policy over here and they're not connecting. The starting point is really kind of understanding the extent to which our very policy-making systems are broken in many, many ways. And we see that whether you look at the kind of degree of cuts we've seen to local authorities over the last decade, and the way that kind of government policy comes through, the fragmentation of that, and the really limited of capacity that now results in our local areas to be able to kind of absorb and work with evidence, because there is just so much focus on delivery and huge pressure to deliver, and huge pressure if that goes wrong. So increasingly, I think that rather what we should be doing is not just connecting one bit to the other, but actually trying to work out how do we create a new space, how do we create headspace, how do we bring those people away from their day jobs and allow them to think about evidence in a different way, and work with them to think about longer term change and not just the latest thing that they have to respond to in a week from national government or whatever it may be. And I just kind of pull up this kind of diagram, which was created by Professor Andy Pike, who we work with at Newcastle University, and it really just shows us the complexity and the richness of the kind of different actors that are operating across local government. And it's a piece of work he did called Who Runs Our Place? And I think our challenge is always like, how do you navigate that, and how do you make sure you're thinking about all of these nodes in relation to not just policy making but decision making. And I think this is especially important, and it's sort of equivalent to the discussion we have in higher education about interdisciplinarity, kind of recognising that the challenges that we face are very, very complex, and you're not going to solve it with one policy intervention, and you're not going to solve it with one insight from one bit of academic evidence. So kind of increasingly, I think there's a role for organisations and actors in this system to think about how do we curate and knit these things together, centred on these really deep-seated and long-standing challenges that the UK and places across the UK face. So kind of thinking about this complexity challenge, these are some of the ways in which Insights North East has sought to address them. So first is to recognise that actually we have to invest in relationship building capacity, and it's really difficult to make the case for that in any of the kind of public forms of funding. But we found that being able to have a team that are really invested in making those relationships, working alongside and with policymakers is your kind of precursor, if you like, for impact. And it sets you up well, but it's really difficult to make the case to invest in it. My previous role was mentioned, so it was actually quite an innovative role that Professor Mary Stewart, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lincoln, set up, where I was funded by both the university and the local enterprise partnership, but based in London, and they wanted me to basically triangulate national, regional and university strategy. And kind of one of the ways that we did that was to think about the local industrial strategies at the time and kind of engage with national government on that, work out what the local industrial strategy should be, and then also write a university industrial strategy and think about the connection between all of those things. I think kind of creating space for cross-system collaboration is really important. Often people in my role, a huge focus is placed on kind of translating academic evidence and pushing it out, but actually just events and bringing people together, thinking about how we can kind of create conversations and headspace is a really important part of this. And then thirdly, we talk a lot about curating the evidence mosaic. And actually a colleague of ours, Hannah Durant, who's based at the Welsh Centre for Public Policy, talks a lot about this. And the value and richness of academic evidence is really important. But to really bring it to life and connect it to policy, we also need to kind of overlay that, not with just with grey literature, but also practitioner experience, and actually a huge amount of evidence that governments have in their hands, and often we don't connect these dots. So my second challenge is the fact that doing this work is ultimately countercultural. So in everything that you try to do, if you're trying to connect across systems, you will be hitting blockers, whether that's funding blockers, ways of working, ways of promoting, ways of recruiting, all of these things. So a lot of my job is actually kind of trying to kind of work through those things. And I think it's really important to recognise that. And this diagram really sort of demonstrates how that is brought to bear at a place-based level. So kind of it really thinks about kind of the different underlying drivers that affect behaviours across the place system. So kind of we've got local authorities, kind of funding pressures, concern about electoral political pressures, regulatory boundaries and competitive pressures. The NHS, kind of a similar set of constraints, but in different spaces. And you probably know these ones for universities best. And I think the point that I'm making here really is that those pressures essentially pull organisations away from each other. And so kind of when sort of universities are seeking to work with local authorities or with NHS, they might have a really good starting conversation and then it goes quiet and they're not quite sure why. And maybe they think they've said something wrong or it hasn't gone that well. And actually the reality is that our system is not set up for collaboration. And I think kind of we need to understand that if we're going to work beyond it. And I've sort of just pulled together kind of, I guess this was a bit cathartic pulling together this list, but kind of some of the issues that I face while trying to work across these divides. I won't go through the university ones, but I think on the policymaker side, it's just really interesting to understand some of these issues, like truncated policy cycles, hollowing out of kind of delivery, but also kind of absorption capacity for evidence. This kind of role we get into constantly at local level of kind of waiting for the national government mandate and then waiting and rumours coming around while we wait, and then all of a sudden something comes out and we have to react in 2 weeks. So all of these things are not conducive to collaboration, I would say. So some of the ways that we've tried to overcome this, I think increasingly I'm talking about this need for patient capital, because actually building collaboration and trust takes time, and it's a matter of kind of one small step after each other and just demonstrating day by day that this is not some drive-by collaboration, that you are going to be there and you're in it for the long haul, but there's a real challenge about funding that. And this idea of building a coalition of the willing has been incredibly powerful. So we launched INE Associates 2 years ago, and it's a network of people on the academic side, so kind of it's often not just about finding where the expertise is, it's about finding the academic that wants to lean into working at a place level. So it's the people that are really kind of inspired by what we're trying to do. And similarly on the policy maker side, you know, yes, they are really time poor and capacity is a huge issue, but yet we meet people across the region working in policy that are just really enthusiastic and desperate to actually do policy differently and really want to lean into this agenda. So that INE Associates network is really that coalition of the willing, of people coming together that are really enthusiastic about doing policy differently and making more use of evidence. And then thirdly, we talk about the fact that it's important to both be demand-led but also to work out a space for challenge back. So the way that we do that in Sites North East is we have this model where there's an offer to work rapidly with policymakers when there's a quick turnaround opportunity, and that has been a huge challenge for universities to do because we all know the typical trajectory of research, but we are able to do that in Sites North East because we have a capacity within the team to do the translation and the quick turnaround. But we are also working in more of a deep dive, kind of collaborative way. But critically, I think, and I increasingly think this is actually where university and academic-based evidence can be really powerful, is to think about what's the long-term change agenda? How can we help policymakers to build a richer picture, to knit together an understanding of these complex challenges, and to not just be waiting for the next government mandate, but to really think at a place level, what is our long-term shared agenda here, and how do we build that, and how do we feed up to national government what we need? So that's sort of related to what you were just saying there. So my third challenge is, and this is a lot of what Richard has touched upon, but it's the fact that the system is highly predicated on competition. And this isn't just true of research funding, it's actually true at local government level as well. I remember being really surprised when I first went to work in that space that it felt actually very similar, the competition between local authorities, to how it feels between universities. But I think kind of in terms of universities, the research funding system is particularly important to think about, especially in relation to kind of what's emerging in terms of thinking about kind of place-based research policy. So kind of we've already noted that the extent to which the UK research funding system is highly selective. And back when I worked at University Alliance, we did a huge amount of work about kind of the role and linkages between selectivity, quality and competition in the sector. And that is a thread that goes all the way through the system. And so I think it's really important to understand the effects of that approach, but also the hierarchy that we embed and recreate at every level of the HE system. So kind of, you know, experience being on kind of funding panels with the research councils, and kind of often kind of being the only person in the room that is speaking from a place perspective rather than that kind of very traditional understanding of how we fund research, and it's difficult. And I think kind of this last point I put here, kind of local evidence for local people, question mark, is not so much the kind of around the idea of kind of the importance of investment at local level and the spillover effect of that, but it's really how we as universities manage our linkages to local policy making, but also make sure that we're really levering those rich relationships we have with other universities, other academic expertise, not just across the UK, but internationally. And I think that's something we still need to work out how to do. I do think it's really important to use place-based entities like ourselves and others working across the UK to really have that deep understanding of local context. Because too often we kind of look to Silicon Valley or other examples and we think it's just a question of shifting and lifting policy interventions from elsewhere in the world. But what you can get from working in this very kind of integrated place-based level is not just a shift and lift, but really kind of thinking about what's appropriate, what might we change, and how do we link that across the different players at regional level. So kind of the final questions I kind of have in relation to this, basically what is a balancing act really between kind of how do we still have richness, quality of evidence across the system, but enable places to really reap the benefits of that. And these are some challenges that I've had, and I'm being quite honest here in some senses, but I think kind of one of the issues is around the ability of combined authorities to arbitrate between local universities, and often we see, especially when you've got kind of competition between different parts of a region, sometimes it might be easier to go to UCL than to kind of choose one of the universities in the northeast. And I think kind of we need to think about how that plays out at a place-based level. So kind of how do we support kind of policymakers working in this space and increasingly thinking about research funding to understand and support complementarity across the system and across universities. There's actually a high amount of complementarity, I would say, across particularly regional universities, and that's because of the way that competition has driven behaviour over time. But we don't understand that, and because higher education is so hierarchical, we're also always running up the same tree, but we need to kind of understand that much better and communicate it much better. So kind of some of the ways that we thought about overcoming that challenge is this idea of seeking shared endeavours, and I'm really interested in the role that evidence can play to kind of raise the conversation away from some of the political pressures and kind of support regions to have a conversation about what they're really good at and use that evidence-based approach to do that. As I said, I think taking a step back is really important, and universities are able to do that, especially with that kind of global view that they are able to link into. And I think kind of this is a system question really. I mean, how do we incentivise complementarity more? This is a very live discussion at the moment across universities with kind of funding challenges and thinking about potential for mergers. But on the research side of things, a lot of the funding drivers really don't incentivise complementarity at all. And I think that causes a lot of implications for thinking about place-based research policy. that's it.
Thank you very much, Liz, and I will introduce our last speaker. Yeah. Okay, let me introduce the last speaker, Mike Wharton, who is a councillor at Halson's representative on the Liverpool City region, but also combined authority, and is currently the deputy mayor for the city region with the portfolio responsibility for business, trade and innovation. Previously, he had been responsible for the culture, tourism and the visitors economy until 2023, and he took his office in 2024. He has lived in the Liverpool City region and all his life has worked ostensibly as the managing accountant in the private sector. Mike, over to you.
Well, thank you, Tobias. Well, good morning, everybody. It's really good to see so many people here today. As Tobias said, I work in local government, and it was great that actually you mentioned local government. I saw right in the middle there, all those boxes. I couldn't read them quite frankly, because even though it was in the front, but it just shows you really the part that local government does play in our lives. But well, how can I follow three excellent speakers? Well, I'll certainly do my best this morning, see whether we can carry on those excellent speeches. But look, I am delighted to be invited here this morning to talk about the challenges and opportunities SciTech and innovation present across the Liverpool City region's economy. And I'm going to talk, as you might expect, about Liverpool City region and our combined authority and what we are currently doing. I've heard some negative stuff, but we are really making progress in the city region. Innovation and pioneering within SciTech in this region is what we do, and we have done it exceptionally since 2013, when we founded the UK's first subnational innovation board. So this has enabled an evolution of our approach to focus on maximising our genuinely distinctive world-leading assets and capabilities to drive investment and growth alongside solving local challenges. Within the Liverpool City region, these strengths are infection prevention and control, materials chemistry and AI, and emerging technologies which sit at the centre of our wider priority sectors. Our innovation ambition is reflected in our North Star mission to invest 5% of regional GVA in research and development by 2030. So alongside this, focuses on our strengths. We are extremely partnership driven, with a huge amount of collaboration already ongoing across the Liverpool City region. And only last month we launched the Liverpool City region local growth plan, and at the University of Liverpool just shows that we do work together. And this plan, which sets the blueprint for our city region for years to come, was developed with all parts of the city region. It reflects our areas of strengths and those which we can propel to be well leading in, whilst creating much needed jobs and growth to the economy, with £2 billion of innovation projects in the pipeline and £11 billion more broadly. So, for example, the revamp of the supercomputer at Hartree. Look, that's in Runcorn, that's in Halton, where I represent, and we are really so proud of that, because it's, I suppose in the UK, it's massive. It really is. We can match Oxford and Cambridge, and it sits here in Runcorn. Perhaps we don't shout about it enough, but it is a collaboration between the SciTech facilities and IBM, and it cannot be underestimated. and the investment in our technological infrastructure every bit as important as investment in our transport system. It just shows you we do take this really, really seriously. It's fantastic to see all this activity being recognised in the city's shortlisting for European Capital of Innovation for 2026. Isn't that fantastic? Here being in the European, possibly being the winner. We'll have to see, won't we? So the second AI Summit our region recently delivered also demonstrates our collective commitment to innovation. Partnering with businesses, academia and research institutions to find smart solutions to everyday challenges. The combined authority is the first public body in the UK to appoint an AI officer, and an AI task force will be created in the new year to help identify best practice in the region where AI is already making a difference, and how and where it can be scaled up to make the biggest impacts. There is huge pressures facing public sector finances, and there's no secret about that, and we've heard that already this morning. But emphasising the need for better collaboration with the private sector and across public sector partners. It is really, really important that actually we do that. The Office of Public Sector Innovation, OPSI, has a huge role to play in this space as we seek to align and integrate local services that deliver what our communities actually need and deserve, especially in education and children's services. Universities are also having to reinvent themselves, especially with pressure of attracting international students, and Liverpool's global brand remains an asset, but how we align industry with our further education and higher education institutions is something we need to develop and strengthen. We need to attract as many overseas students as possible to this Liverpool City region, and actually we've got a really good story to tell. The Liverpool City region is also the forefront of place-based innovation and cited as an exemplar for UK research and innovation, Innovate UK and others. And it is fantastic news that the Chancellor has identified the LCR as a pilot case for Green Book review. Today's brilliant event, and I have to say thank you to those organisers, is why with Triple Helix Industry Civic Partnership at its core, and I look forward to this fascinating panel later. So, what more can be done to enhance the innovation ecosystem, and what is Liverpool City Region Combined Authority in this? The City Region has been at the UK forefront of place-based innovation ever since forming the UK's first Regional Innovation Board in 2013. The Mayor has set a clear goal of investing 5% of GVA in research and development each year by 2030, and this just shows the scale of our ambition. Innovation is a clear regional strength and priority. The golden thread in our Liverpool City Region growth plan, and at the heart of the CA's corporate plan entitled Innovating for Growth. Look, it's really worth, after this, go and have a look at it on the website. It really is an interesting document. So our place-based innovation approach is based on evidence, partnership and smart specialisation. That is laser focus on our strengths, have been recognised as leading nationally by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, DCIT, UK Research and Innovation UKRI and the Royal Society. The CA plays a lead role in convening and coordinating the innovation ecosystem, including facilitating the Liverpool City Region Innovation Board and catalysing new policies, partnerships and projects. For example, the City Region is one of only 10 places earmarked for £30 million plus as part of the Local Innovation Partnership Fund. This is aimed at scaling distinctive regional innovation clusters to drive national growth, which in the Liverpool City Region case means materials chemistry, infection prevention and control, and AI and emerging solutions. The City Region, well, we have a proud history of successfully delivering UK research and innovation. Place-based innovation programmes, for example, as a successful national pilot area for Innovate UK's Launchpad programme, now rolled out to 8 other places, and the Liverpool School of Medicine led ICON Infection Innovation Consortium as the most successful project of the UK Strength in Places programme, leveraging over £250 million of funding from an initial £18.6 million investment to develop new infection control and control systems. The CA is also delivering on the government's Life Sciences Innovation Zone, which is part of the UK's government's national programme of investment zones, investing £160 million over 10 years in life sciences projects. The Innovation Zone is projected to deliver up to £800 million of government and private investment and create approximately 8,000 new jobs. The Innovation Zone is investing heavily in infrastructure to develop the life sciences cluster, such as new lab space, business accelerator programs and careers initiatives. It is also vital that innovation delivers inclusive growth for the region. Through the Local Innovation Partnership Fund and more widely, we are seeking to embed a quadruple helix. That's a coordination model that incorporates social and community innovation, representing alongside civic, academic and business stakeholders in an innovation decision making. Look, it's no point in having a triple helix. You need to be thinking about our communities, because it's all this work has to have an impact and has to help our people out there. So that's why we're saying it needs to be quadruple. We can't leave out our communities. At the end of the day, that's who I represent when I'm stood here. Okay, so we do need the appropriate space for businesses, and in the Liverpool City region we have 2 complementary science innovation districts. We have the Knowledge Quarter in Liverpool, in the city centre, and UK Research and Innovation, UKRI's northern headquarters on the SciTech Daresbury campus in Runcorn. The expansion of both innovation districts is being supported through funding from the Innovation Zone programmes, with high-spec office and lab space at Hemisphere in the Knowledge Quarter and Project Violet at SciTech Daresbury. So we are doing a lot of things, aren't we, in the city region. So, but as well as the vital role that universities play in creating startups and spin-outs, these are also supported through the CA-backed Liver Labs and Baltic Ventures programmes. Liver Labs provides funding and runs accelerator programmes to develop small and medium-sized enterprises within our priority growth sectors of health and life sciences, advanced manufacturing, digital and technologies and clean energy. Baltic Ventures works as an incubator with tech-focused startups. The CA has also convinced the Treasury to re-evaluate its Green Book methodology. I think that's really important actually for areas like this. But the reimagining of Central Station is the key project to benefit from this, and the impact on how people arrive in Liverpool will have a massive impact in terms of connectivity to businesses. Again, that's absolutely vital. It's no good having all these businesses if we can't get people there. So, Liverpool City region, we did publish our local growth plan and with an aim to increase productivity. We've heard about productivity and the failure in some ways of lots of regions not to achieve the goals that we want to. But we have a long-standing partnership and smart specialisation approach to innovation, seeking to maximising our world-leading assets and capabilities to drive investment, productivity and growth alongside solving our problems. And I've got somebody signaling me to shut up in a minute. I'm sorry, but he's signaling. I've got not long left now, I promise you. Look, this is reflected in the local city region growth plan and in our highest profile key assets alongside the University of Liverpool's Materials Innovation Factory in partnership with Unilever, and that has been a centrepiece of today. It's always a problem when you're last, isn't it, really? Your time gets squashed. So the Liverpool City School of Medicine led Infection Innovation Consortium programme has over 900 global partners and demonstrate world-leading capabilities in infection prevention and control, while the Science and Technology Facilities Council, STFC and Hartree Centre is a partnership with IBM, demonstrate world-leading capabilities in our AI and emerging technologies. And because I've been asked to rush it, I'll just finish off by saying, look, this is a great opportunity for us all to discuss how the future of science naturally helps us all move forward. But I did want to thank you all for listening, and I hope that some of the things I've said does stimulate some thought and debate. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. We'll have this quick shift in the camera and we'll start our panel discussion. Just needs to be. The screen can be okay. And for the okay, so just to start on, I should say to our audience online, use Slido to submit the questions. We'll do our best to hear you and address your questions to the room and to the panel. Thank you very much for fascinating questions. It was great. So just to start, when you are thinking about your question to the panel, I was wondering, because recently the Lords Committee published a report, Bleeding Out, about the science and technology and the issues with the scaling up and maintaining the R&D capital in the UK. I was wondering from your perspective, from the national devolved and the local level, what are the main non-financial barriers which stop R&D to stay in the country and also to grow? Okay, guys.
Wow, that's a really big question to start with. The non-financial questions, I think that's really tricky. In Wales, we're quite unique in that we have a lot of financial barriers, and actually they are probably the root cause of a lot of this capability. But I think the non-financial barriers, a lot of this goes down to that communication, that last slide that I put on there. I think it's the points that Mike raises as well around the fantastic investments that are being done in Liverpool, right? And I think part of this, when we're attracting industry in, when we think about academia, we think about research, we think about UKRI, attracting investments, it's all around high quality stuff, right? High quality bids. Is your science the best? Is your process the best, right? That's really important. But industry doesn't necessarily operate on that, because industry, they like big, right? They like sexy. They want, you know, is this going to be something that's going to be really great that when they put it on their brochure for their investors are going to go, wow, that's brilliant, okay? And a lot of our investors, I think, and companies, they're overseas companies, they're from America, and I think there's this bit of this traditional image around the UK and England and Oxford and Cambridge, and that makes it really difficult, I think, in the regions to look as interesting, I think, to industry when they're trying to get investors on board. That's sort of my take on that. And I think what we need to do, as I said in that communication bit, is be better at communicating about what we're doing and what we bring from that regions. And I think we've got to double down from what is being done from the centre out on the limbs. We've got to try almost twice as hard, put twice as much effort into that, and to really sell that, because we're really great at talking about high quality bids, you know, doing this great science, but that is not always what gets investment on board. That's what gets research funding on board, research councils, not always the language of industry. And I think that's what we probably need to do better, and that's probably, to me, one of those big barriers around keeping things going and getting that investment coming in.
Elise?
So I think one of the biggest problems is the fact that public funding is geared to upfront and then it's over in a flash. So we're very good at funding buildings, but we're not very good at funding people, especially over the longer term. And the fact is that to really translate and reap the benefits of these innovations, we have to understand it's a long-term endeavour, and we need to really think about how we can re-engineer public policy and funding around that. And sort of akin to that, I think kind of government needs to understand the power of the signals that it sends for industry to invest and stay, and also reap the rewards of the UK-based innovation. And that's also impacted by our tendency to kind of want very quick policy announcements.
Thank you. Richard, what data says?
Well, first of all, I think the Lord's report's a great report, and it's very, very hard-hitting, and I think quite right to be hard-hitting. I think, yeah, non-financial. I am going to insist money does matter. Money's not the only thing, but it does matter. But private sector money is probably, even more important than public sector money. And the disparities in venture capital funding across the country are even larger than the disparities in public funding. So we've tried to work a bit in Manchester with partners in Leeds and Sheffield with Northern Gritstone as the kind of dedicated northern funding agent. Really glad that Liverpool University's been brought into that very recently, so this is all part of that. But to come back to the non-financial things, I've just got to mention it. It is the transport. The distance between Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool. This should be an economic unit on a par with Randstad. The kind of equivalent population that you find in the Netherlands. But if I want to drive from Sheffield to Manchester, I ended up on a single carriageway road with a set of traffic lights and watching my mum and dad on a huge tail back. I kind of enjoyed getting up at 5:30 this morning to get the train across, but just the business of getting around our cities and getting between the cities, because I think it's really important. And Mike's really absolutely justifiably proud of everything that's happening in Liverpool. We've got the right to be doing that. I'm proud of what we've done in Manchester, but Manchester and Liverpool together, and Leeds and Sheffield, that's going to be, in combination, that will be so much more powerful, and we just can't do it. We can't get from one place to another.
Can I put you on the spot, Mike? What's the combined authority?
You can always put me on the spot, but I think I put you on the spot before when you signal me to cut what I was saying down. But look, there's a few things here. Actually, Gav, you're right when you say about communication. Communication is key to everything that we all do. Okay, you're asking about non-financial issues, but for me, this is about us all talking to governments, telling them, and in fact, in some ways, the city region, we've managed to convince government, look, that we are the place that's worth investing in, and you only get that by actually delivering projects. And so far, we've done okay, but of course it does help that actually we have a Labour government, and I'll say this, and we've got Labour mayor, and we've got 6 Labour leaders, so that helps communication, and it helps us to try and convince government that we can deliver. Transport is an issue, of course it is, but of course that's all about finance as well, isn't it? We want government to invest. It seems a bit of nonsense really. It takes just as long to get to Liverpool to Leeds on the train as it does to take a week to get from Liverpool to London. That can't be right, can it, at all? And of course, we want to be able to work with Manchester and Leeds, because this is what the North West area should be doing, working together. But of course, we need to be working with our universities, our private investors, and in fact that's the way forward, all talking together and actually coming together. And this is a great chance, isn't it, to sell what we do, and hopefully to try and encourage people to work with us all so that we can actually deliver, because I'm about residents and you guys deliver for you, because you have to use all the systems and everything else that we use. But yeah, it's a difficult one because it's non-financial, and we're all actually geared to thinking how can we balance our next year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I will open the floor to the questions. Colleagues, when you ask questions, please say your name and where you're from.
I'm Jenny Andrew. I work for a Prospect Trade Union. My question is financial, but it's less about the amounts of science funding and more about the modes of science funding. Now, I think here in the UK, we tend to put more of our public funding for science into competitive funding and less into institutional funding than some of the, our competitor nations across Europe. And I just wonder how much that drives this kind of Hunger Games of competition, which, as Liz was talking about, we're not really set up for collaboration in the way that we should be. So I'd just be interested to hear whether you think we're getting the balance right of those modes of R&D funding.
Thank you. Who wants to take it? Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because you're right. The UK is an international outlier in how much of its public funding it puts through universities, and so the importance of UKRI in the system is disproportionate, in fact. And now I've retired from the university, I can maybe be more outspoken about this. I think it's really tough. My role in 2 universities has been to drive collaboration with industry particularly, and it's difficult. It doesn't fit in with the culture of our universities. So I think our universities do need to change. And I think in both Manchester and Sheffield we went some way to do that. But I think there is an institutional hole for institutions whose role is not to win competitive funding, but to kind of support an industry cluster, to support the industry commons, to bring together skills, supply chain development, all the things that go beyond pure R&D that make companies, that can help companies be successful in high-tech areas. And I'd very much like to see more work in developing those kind of institutions. And universities have to lean into that too. And research universities in particular, research intensives like University of Liverpool and University of Manchester, in some ways they have a lot of potential, but in some ways they have to change the most because they are so attuned to that kind of competitive bidding.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I already shared quite a lot of my thoughts when I spoke, but I guess the thing I would add is I think thinking about the cultural dimension of this is really important because research councils have, over the past number of years, kind of set an intention to think more about regional collaboration, think about kind of cluster-based investments. But as what Richard pointed out, it's not something that they have really fully understood yet. And one practical way that we can think about addressing this is actually just engaging more with research councils. I think they do advertise for roles on their boards, but typically the same people go for those, and so you end up with a reinvention of that culture over and over again. And I think kind of we need a richer set of people to engage with the way that research councils are trying to work in this space in order for them to act differently.
Really interesting question. I've probably got 2 perspectives from it. I think whatever system you put in place or approach, you will end up with these perverse outcomes and things that happen because at the end of the day this is all involving people, and especially in, I think, any field, you have people who shout the loudest and want to be the best, and the system will lean that way, and that's really hard to defend against. We want the best research and we want the best science, so there has to be an element of competitiveness to it, but we've got to collaborate, because if we don't collaborate we die, okay? There are a number of proposals for bids for UKRI, multi-council things that have come my way to support from policy colleagues that come to government. And I say, is this really a collaborative bid? And can you go away and collaborate better with university, with some colleagues? Yeah, okay, go away, but come back. And then there's a few more names from people from universities on there that are just down as hours for their time on it. I go, but is that really benefiting that university? Is this a collaboration, or have you just put down 10 hours for that professor from that other university? Are you working together, or are you just oh no, we're working together. Oh, are their overheads covered? And suddenly people go, oh gosh, this guy knows what overheads are. And that's really challenging because we've got to collaborate, and I think the system isn't set up to really clearly define what collaboration looks like in terms of financial benefit and resources and capability building across different universities. I think in terms of that cut up on what we use our R&D funding for, so in Wales we can spend our R&D money however we want, it's our decision. Now in health and social care, we make the decision that we don't really spend really any of our R&D budget on funding actual research, but we fund the capability. So we instead invest in resources and people and training, so we have a better chance at capturing UKRI funding, because that's where the main money is. So that's really important. But you've got to have this mix. But I would say, my note is, whatever you do, you will get some crazy effect, because we're working with people. We're working especially in higher education and in public services with desperate services that are on the brink of extinction. And when you're at that, it's really hard to take big risks and collaborate truly. I think that is a big challenge.
Okay, so for the time, we'll now take 3 questions in the row, okay? So, yep. And there's another one.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Tasker-Blake. I'm one of this year's FST cohort, and I work for TWI Limited. On the communications aspect that a couple of you have touched on, there's lots of different ways that you could approach that, whether it is hiring in more sort of marketing and comms people, whether it is teaching scientists how to do comms for themselves, depending whether you want to go to newspapers or the BBC or local authority. And it's nice to say we should do everything and we should do a little bit of it and we should all work together. But if you were given one sentence each for prioritising one of those things, which do you think could have the most impact or could be the lowest hanging fruit?
Thank you. And there was a question over here.
Hi, I'm Pete Leather, and I'm from Liverpool John Moores University, one of 3 universities in the city. Some really interesting conversations going on about where the gaps are. I'm of an age now where I've seen a number of governments in this country come and go. And whilst the terminology in the language changes, you're all talking the same problems from 25, 30 years ago, and nothing actually ever changes in this country. And until you get a government of whatever colour, I'm not interested, until you get a government that listens to what's going on and then communicate locally, we're not going to get any change in this country.
Thank you very much. And we have some questions online.
So this is coming from online, and this is for Richard, but I think possibly for others as well. For areas without combined authorities, how do we ensure that they're not further left behind with the focus on triple helix partnerships?
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a question about the communication, about the gaps, and about the regions without the combined authority. Okay, so can we start from the communication? Mike?
Yeah, actually, Charlotte, really good point you made. Really, I always think that we should leave marketing and comms for the experts, not to ask other people to do that, because I don't think it's the job of scientists, for example, to do marketing and comms. They need people alongside them to do all the messages outside. I think that's my only answer to that, really.
So on that question, I would say don't forget about connecting as well as communicating, because I think quite often, and universities are really kind of good at doing this, your comms can work in the opposite directions for kind of efforts to collaborate, and I think it's really important to understand that a bit better.
I agree with both points. I think it's around leaving it to the experts and making sure you're committed. I don't think it's necessarily a scientist's job to do that, but I think it's something that I was spoken to Rich about earlier. And it's about having comms people who are excellent translators who can translate that and put that in the right way in which people can understand and people can pick up.
And Richard, on the...
Yeah, so my answer to that would be I'm an idealist about democracy, and actually I think what's been really good to me about the developments of the last 5 years in the local, discussing place-based innovation has been the degree to which I've seen, I've been shamelessly appealed to my panelists, but Mike come along as the leader of a council and speak so passionately and so knowledgeably about the innovation that happens in his patch, I think is something that's a relatively recent development. And I've seen it in Manchester. I've seen Andy Burnham go from someone who barely knows about innovation to someone who really does understand it and really understands its region and can really go out and sell that to all the people, his electorate. And I think that's really important. And I'd really like to stress that I think that a really great benefit of this new focus on place-based innovation has been involving local politicians and getting local politicians to understand and be able to advocate for the importance of innovation.
Mike, what can we do to address this gap? So governments are changing, the priorities are changing, so what can we do to maintain the governmental focus?
John who asked that, was it, yeah?
Yeah.
You said you've been around for a long time. I think I've probably been around a lot longer than you actually. But look, I'm a politician. I've always been a politician. I firmly believe that this government will make a difference because, I'll tell you why, we have the fair funding review coming up, which is about how money is allocated between local authorities, and they're going to start looking at needs and deprivation. The previous government didn't over 14 years, and we got absolutely hammered by that, and we got lots of money taken off us. I'm hoping from the fair funding review they'll recognise areas like Liverpool, Halton, that actually we need more funding. Some of the funding needs to shift from the southeast up here to the north, and that will hopefully be recognised in the next few weeks by the government. So that's why I think there is a difference between parties, and that's really important to me. Now, it's a bit weird, isn't it, that actually you can be in Westminster and you can pay council tax half of what you pay in Liverpool. That doesn't sound right to me, and hopefully this government will start to address that. So I think there is a big difference actually. We could go on forever. I wouldn't mind a chat after this meeting if you don't mind about politics, but it's good. But really good question. I got your point.
And what hope can we give to the regions without combined authority, Richard?
I think, like everything in British politics, one wouldn't necessarily have started here and one wanted to get to an ideal place. The English devolution story is kind of really weird and patchy one. I think, it's not, if you had sat down to design this properly, if we'd, Cliff Ward recommendations had been adopted in 1973, we'd be in a much better position. But here we are. Mayoral combined authorities have arrived. They've had some longevity. So I think that's the way this is going to happen. I think the one thing, the way that the mayoral combined authorities, the one dynamic that has produced has been a kind of, it is a dynamic of competition, and in a way that's kind of, I'm not sure I would have started out this way, but I can see the benefits of it. The fact is, people have looked at Manchester, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and said, "Oh, how come they've got that degree of devolution and we haven't?" And they've gone and created those structures. And so I've seen it in West Yorkshire, which I've had a certain amount to do with. I've seen it most recently, East Midlands. You see good people are attracted there, good officers are being brought in there, capacity's being built, and it's being, and it is to some extent being done by people looking at what's happened in those places that are further down those journeys, down that journey, and wanting to emulate that. So, like I say, it's probably not the route that I would have chosen, but filling in the English devolution map has got some kind of strategic combined authority, and then those places learning from best practice in those regions that have done it the best. I think that's how it's going to unfold, and it's not the worst thing.
Okay, now we'll take the final interventions and the final questions. Ian?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think this is probably one of the most enlightening plenaries I've sat in for some time, so thank you for taking the time to sort of collect those thoughts and share them with us. What really strikes me across all of them is that we're dealing with that magical combination of pace and complexity. I think the pace side of it drives centralisation, because that's generally a quicker way of getting to a solution, whether it's the best one is up for debate. Whereas that sort of more bottom-up evolved approach is better for grappling with complexity. Do you think that bottom approach can work at pace, or at a pace that is relevant?
Okay, and we'll take 2 more questions if there are any. Yes? Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Hello, I'm not quite sure this is for the panel, but we're from the world of education from high schools. And I noticed that one of you has been a governor of a school. It's been really interesting to listen to the science and technology that's going on in the region, but what happens to the young people that are learning science in high schools that isn't appropriate to what you're all talking about? And we're talking about collaboration. There should be collaboration between what you're doing and the DFE and the curriculum review, because it's not fit for purpose what the young people, and they're the people that are going to come through and replace what's happening there. So I just want to know, what your thoughts are really. I'm from the Comino Foundation, and I know that we have links with the Comino Foundation, and I work with schools right across Greater Manchester. So I'm not quite sure whether it's appropriate, but it's something that I firmly believe in, that we aren't fit for purpose in the science curriculum. I've got teachers here today.
Thank you very much. And the last one?
Yeah, got one more from the online chat, and I think actually links quite nicely to that question, but is, and for Liz specifically, what do you think the role of social scientists is in this sort of meaningful interdisciplinary research that you spoke about?
Okay, so we have the question about the education. I would say skills, social sciences, and the pace. Can we start with it? Oh.
I'm going to go on the centralisation to the other side of that, and the complexity of pace. It's a really great question, right? And this is the challenge that we face now. When I think about what we look in Wales about increasing commercial trial delivery, ultimately the people who deliver these things are the people who are in the health boards and the front lines. But to be able to get industry in, we have to have a centralised approach, and we need to try and do it as a whole country thing. But the challenges in the different health boards are different, and they've got a different setup, and they've got different people. So if we take a centralised approach, it will fail, ultimately. We might look really great and be a great front door, but then actually delivering it is really hard. And if we just completely focused on that sort of limbed approach, then we're trying to sell like 7 different ways of doing things in a country of 3.2 million people, which is bonkers at the same time. It's really hard. I would say it's so hard. I think we need to find something where it falls in the middle, or rather we need to be better at identifying the roles of people who take a centralised position in this and what those limbs do. So it can't be totalitarian. So I think there are some things that we have to agree that we're going to do on a central basis, and there's things, that variation that we have to have on a regional or local basis to be able to get that benefit through that. It's really hard from the commercial trial delivery thing. If anyone has the answers and can crack it, please let me know, because that's the $1 million question for me at the moment. It's so hard. It is so hard. And I wish I had the answers. I think there is that point of getting that. I think unnecessary variation of things is bad. Getting people to standardise as far as reasonably practicable is good. But I will end my point on a bit of an anecdote around pathology services. So in Wales, right, it's really great. We've got one digital pathology service for Wales, right? So if you have a blood test in North Wales, a clinician down in Cardiff can see that blood test result. Brilliant, right? You can't necessarily do that in England. But there are 300 or 400 different protocols for a full blood count in Wales. because every clinician likes it, the limits done slightly differently, because I want that. So there is all this unnecessary variation for the one same blood test, right? And trying to get clinicians to say, that's really great that you like that, but you know, you've got to agree with your colleagues, is really, really, really hard, okay? And that problem still hasn't been fixed. So that is part of the challenge that I think you've got to fix to be able to meet that happy medium and to be able to work at pace then. Sorry.
And Liz, on social sciences and maybe education?
Yeah, so I think social sciences it's really interesting actually. So I mentioned that we found that it's not just a question of finding where the expert is, but it's finding the expert that wants to lean into working in their place. And actually, kind of the stars in this are often the social scientists. And interestingly, often social scientists working in non-social science departments, we find that they've got particular skills in what we need to do if we're connecting evidence to policy. So I think that they have a really important role to play. And we need to understand it in a much broader way, not just within their discipline, but without it as well. And on the education point, I think I'm glad you asked the question. I think it's really, really important. I mean, Richard touched on the fact that kind of the skills is often not to do with kind of thinking about innovation. We've been doing some work on how we can have more inclusive innovation, particularly when you have kind of a big investment going into a particular innovation site in a city. And when we seek public investment for those initiatives, we talk about how many jobs will be created. But we don't really understand how to make sure that those jobs can go to a wide range of people across the region, and knitting in the skills and education system are the keys to unlocking that. And I think kind of the way that we do policy really does stratify education, skills and innovation, and to unlock a lot of what we're talking about, we need to work out how to bring it together. And it's not just divided at national level, it's divided at regional and local level as well.
And the mic?
Yeah, actually, the question on education is really important. I've been a school governor in a junior school, actually. Now look, I've seen AI used in junior schools, and it's absolutely amazing, because if you ask me about AI, I don't know a great deal about it, but it is about equipping our young people for the jobs of the future. And actually, we can't. It's difficult to predict what jobs they'll be, because they'll change so much from here we are today, when somebody who's 10 and when they actually come out of university, if they decide to go to university, because not every young person wants to go to university. But the other thing about this is we have to equip them for the jobs of the future. I'll just give you a small example of Riverside College in Widnes. They actually have an area in that college where there's pipes and everything else, and they actually recreate what it's like to work on huge pipes for those young people who want to go into that type of industry. But it is about planning for the future, and this is all about HINET, and HINET's one of the areas where we'll be expanding in the future. But they are trying to equip people for the jobs that are available. But it is a really, really important point, because higher education has to feed into universities to make sure that we are preparing people for those jobs that will become available. Don't ask me what they'll be, because I don't know at this point in time, because things change so much, don't they, with technology. But it is a really important question. Thank you for that. That's good.
Yeah, just to comment points about education. Yeah, I think the curriculum review was very disappointing. I think the Royal Society, which I'm going to tomorrow, they wrote a number of fellows wrote and how disappointed they were from people who've been thinking about the needs of connecting up the science curriculum with the needs of the modern science-based economy. I think our focus in GM has been firstly on the FE sector, and there, one of the things that I was really pleased to have done, we tried, when we got some money from the Innovation Accelerator, we thought, great, we can try some different things. Let's give some of this money to the FE sector. And Innovate UK said, you can't do that, we don't fund FE. And to their credit, they changed their mind, and they came back and they produced this pilot program for bringing the FE, the Further Education Innovation Fund, which GGM benefited from. So I thought that was really great, and it absolutely speaks to your point, Mike. It was absolutely about how are we going to get people trained for the trade not for the economy that we've got in a sense, but for this new economy that we want to have that's more productive and has more rewarding jobs. So I think it's crucial. I think I not be as rude about DFE as I always want to be, but and just a final comment on the centralisation versus. I guess I can see why doing things centrally might, in principle, sound like it's quicker, but frankly, experience doesn't bear that out. And if I kind of look at the changes that's happened in the research councils between, when the research councils were independent bodies sitting in Swindon and when they're now part of UKRI, the degree of delay and administration that has caused really leads me to doubt that whether centralisation in practice actually is faster. I mean, I remember with the Innovation Accelerator pilot, a case in point. We were that programme was supposed to be starting on the 1st of April. I was in mid-March saying, what's happened? Oh, the Treasury business case hasn't been signed off yet. And we were kind of thinking, how are we going to kind of appoint people? How am I going to get AI specialists in post for the, for this 2-year programme? Because it was so held up with this back and forth between BEIS and the Treasury and UKRI. So I think actually decentralisation can be much nimbler. I think combined authorities and local government, if they're given the freedom to do it, can get stuff to happen much more quickly.
Thank you very much. Please join me with thanking the panel. We will now have really 10 minutes, 5 minutes comfort break before our keynote speaker, Professor David Nye. Okay, so please join us back in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine.
Absolutely fine. Very messy notes.
So what have you got? Hi, Gavin.
Yeah. I sent it through to you. I don't know if you've got it yet.
Oh, right, okay. So part of the problem is because of the live stream, it needs to be on. So the easiest thing is if I take out I just put that on the presentation. What I need is video tech guy.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Glass. I'm going to do
what? You shouldn't have told me before.
Brief and humorous, right?
I try, but I do work in science policy. I'm not a stand-up comedian.
That stands for
I think everyone's frustrated with that.
I've always got to get people
Keep it
Who do you
brief.
communicate for?
I work in science policy.
Is it Darsby for this year? Is it Daresby?
I spend all of my time talking about symptoms and flavors.
Big science.
Big science on a big scale. Where have you come from? West?
I come from Bristol.
Oh, okay. Difficult journey, long one.
Yeah. It worked. It takes work. They're a bit crowded. They're very uncomfortable. Better than stand
up and walk around.
Yeah, I like the lead. Where did you come from?
Sussex. I grew up yesterday.
And so we were talking about this and what the scene is.
Long journey. We've had a big
most people staying overnight.
Yeah, so we have a dinner this evening, and then tomorrow we're actually going to visit one of SFC's sites, so Warrington. No, it's Dartford.
Oh, Dartford. Oh, yeah, the synchrotron.
Oh no, the synchrotron's down.
Was that in Hartwell?
That's in Hartwell. It used to be in Dartford.
Yeah. It tells you how old I am, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed it is. No, we've got a supercomputing
Oh, cool. Is that where British supercomputing happens?
it happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. But we have the Hartu Centre, which is a supercomputing facility centred on serving kind of industry. They have a big program around quantum now as well. R&D facilities, various things. I should know because it's one of our sites.
I'm going to dump this down and I'm going to get a drink and
Go
I'll be
for
back.
it.
Don't start without me, right?
No, we'll try not to. We'll try not to. He was just going to go off and grab a drink.
Well, because we're trying to find the IT people, right?
Oh.
Because, well, he should be here.
He should
tech
be
guy,
here.
And I'd say Tobias has paid for the tech guy to be here all day, and he's just now gone. And it's incredibly but yes, I know. I've been able to get David's slides up, but I don't know. Well, I don't know how to get them on there, but more importantly, I want them on the live stream.
Yes,
it's quite cold up there. Is everything okay?
Just
to let you know. I know people are still covering up.
Yeah, no, I saw.
Stuff, so
Very
let you know.
considerate of you. Thank you. We'll try and find that token. That's meeting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to do the brief.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Irritating.
It's just like, Tobias is living because he's actually paid money from his own university budget to have a guy here all day.
I can't remember what they looked like.
No, he's not in the room. Tobias is running. No, he's not here. He's not.
Yeah.
He's just napped off. And it's.
Do we need to then tell?
We've got feedback, which is this one for.
Lost a bit of paper with the timings on it.
Yeah, so we're running late, but running late's fine. What it means, I think, is that
He was speaking for the whole time. He won't have questions.
to be honest with you, just play it by ear. I think if people have a couple of questions, that'll be fine. If he can just take them from him.
Yeah, of course. We'll just have a think about.
What do we do if the what do we do in 5 years? We're going to have to award all these contracts temporarily, and then the system will start. So then you don't pay us. You want us to the bell's gone.
No tech guy. What's the problem?
Well,
Oh, you got to link up the.
I think I'm on the front. I mean, I could plug your laptop in and people here can see, but we got it working with the set slides before, but of course he then changed it with the panel. And then and he was in the room for that, and now he's just disappeared. And it's like, well, anyway, don't worry about the timings of this. Just do your bit and it'll be fun. People have less time for lunch, that's absolutely fine.
There's going to be lunches here.
And immediately after lunch, it's a sort of break section, so if they start, that means you start.
We as a future leaders
Are you seeing that?
Well, actually, I didn't know if
You can tell them I was singing their praise and so on.
But yeah, I think it's that relationship between the facility and the site that we have with those regional partners. So much of a big part, I think, of why this strategy is thinking about sites of our facilities, how much in that
It is an art fantastic. Certainly you can all go into that. down after the chat.
So what I've done is I've swapped over the my slides with these slides. So the two things I need to do is to get the camera so that it's the camera here, whatever that camera is, and get these slides up. And that I think is done on that screen, but I don't want to touch that because I don't know how that works.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike, you are. Thank you so much. Want to find that? Yes, if that's somehow move it, but make it into
Okay, so if there is here.
Okay, so that should be alright. And let me just check to see if because we need it up on there as well. So let me just check it's if it's visible.
Yep, works.
Okay, now David's there. Right, okay.
Hi everyone. We can. Oh, hello. If we can take our seats back, please. Thank you. Firstly, thank you for your patience. This afternoon, I will give a very, very brief introduction because I'm sure you're all much more keen to hear from our keynote speaker this morning, Professor David Nutt. So, very briefly, I think we all know he's had a long, illustrious career in research and is currently the director of, see if I can say this correctly, neuropsychopharmacology unit at Imperial College London. But perhaps more widely, we know that his work and his experience straddles some of the key areas and themes of our discussion today. Realizing the opportunities and addressing the challenges in research and innovation really requires synergy, engagement with academic research, but also in innovation and policy. And it's this engagement in policy that I think we all find particularly interesting. in addition to his position on numerous advisory boards and councils, both within the UK, the EU and globally, he has been a vocal advocate for the role of research in addressing challenges, societal challenges, and particularly the importance of evidence-based policy making. And with, I think, that in mind, we know that he's been engaging proactively in all the strands of the quadruple helix, in addition to his public engagement work, and through this work has been able to enact meaningful change in the area of harm reduction. So I will now please welcome Professor David Nutt. Thank you.
Well, it's can you hear me all right? Yeah?
Yeah.
It's very good to be here. Thanks for the invite. If you told me you had a drinks reception afterwards, I'd have provided the alternative that I'm going to talk about, but just remember that for the next time. And if you want to read more, there's some books. Yeah, I gather that you're the future of leadership. I suppose probably you invited me as an example of a failed past leader. That's me being sacked as the chair of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. The hand over my mouth, anyone know whose hand that is? He was a Home Secretary at the time. Obviously, actually a long way from here, the other side he was in, from Hull. He's Alan Johnson, who was trying to shut me up because I was saying the British drug policy wasn't evidence-based. I was saying that cannabis was a medicine. And on the bottom left-hand side of the image, you can see the scales of justice tipped in favour of alcohol and tobacco, which are clearly the most harmful drugs in the UK. And the hysteria that was being created before the 2010 election around mephedrone, MCAT, meow meow, was just a smokescreen to avoid people confronting the truth of the drugs which cause most harm in society. That conflicted with government opinion at the time, and so they got rid of me. Thankfully, they didn't shut me up because it's quite difficult to do. Many people have tried. And there's an article in the Times, sacked advisor warns of alcohol time bomb, and well, that is what I'm going to talk about today, how we can avoid the alcohol time bomb by using science. As I was sacked, a more educated colleague of mine wrote to me this little note. David, he said, you obviously haven't read Voltaire because you would know it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong, which is a general principle that you're going to have to live with if you're going to change things. So why did I say that alcohol was the most dangerous and problematic drug, certainly more problematic than the ones that were controlled at the time? And that's because of this analysis here, which we published in The Lancet a couple of years later, the most sophisticated analysis of the harms of drugs that's been done using a technique called multi-criteria decision analysis. And I can suggest to you all, if you have to engage in decision-making, complicated decision-making, where there are many variables with different dimensions, you should do MCDA. It is unquestionably the most powerful way of disentangling both problems and solutions. It's not easy to do, but it's well worth doing it. Not least because if you do it, you learn an awful lot about what you don't know. That's another story, but I highly recommend any of you to think about using it because it is a very powerful technique. And having done that, having spent several conferences with groups of experts doing MCDA on drug harms in the UK, we came to this conclusion, which is on the left-hand side. You see this, the size of the histogram is the magnitude of the harm of each different drug to society, to this country. The red bars are the harms to society. The blue bars are the magnitude of harms to the individual. And you can see that alcohol is the most harmful. And they scale down to, on the right-hand side, magic mushrooms are the least harmful. So that's exactly the opposite of what the current government drug policy says. And it's wrong, therefore. However, that wasn't just a UK analysis. It's been replicated by the European Department of Justice through 30 different European experts, 20 different countries. It's been replicated in Australia. It's been replicated in New Zealand and replicated in paper that's in press now. In Canada, in all Western societies where alcohol is a legal drug, it is the most harmful drug. And that is because of the harm to other people, to society. It's not the most harmful drug to the user, which is reassuring to you because most of you are going to drink tonight. But overall, alcohol is the most damaging drug. And it's the leading cause of death in men under the age of 50 in this country, and it will be the leading cause of death in women. It may already achieve that status, but they're holding back the data because I think they're terrified to discover that that is also true. The last data we had just before COVID-19 was a 6% rise in alcohol-related female deaths in 1 year, which is absolutely unprecedented rise in deaths from almost any drug other than fentanyl. So it's a big problem. It kills a lot of people, particularly young middle-aged people. Why does alcohol exist? Well, why are you going to drink tonight? Well, you're going to drink tonight because it's going to make your evening more sociable. In fact, it'd probably be pretty miserable if you didn't drink tonight. Oh, that's just a thought. It's a hypothesis. You can test it if you want. So alcohol exists because of its pleasurable effects, and particularly the effects that alcohol has to bring people together. And it's something I guess almost all of you have experienced. It encourages togetherness, it encourages us to socialise, it encourages us to get intimate with people. And it does it through changing the brain. And over the years it's become evident that one of the main targets, almost certainly the major necessary target of alcohol in the brain to produce the effect we want, which is relaxation, sociability, conviviality, is through activating a neurotransmitter in the brain called GABA. GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. It calms the brain down, which is what alcohol does. The first thing they do on aeroplanes when they take off the seatbelt sign is to serve alcohol is because so many people in the air are terrified, and alcohol is a relaxant. And there's an interesting debate going on between anthropologists about why human society actually ended up being as successful as it is. And the success of humans comes from the fact we stopped being nomads and we started settling down in villages and then towns. And the drive to settle down was because we learnt how to cultivate cereals. And when you've got to wait for the cereals to grow, and while you're waiting for them to grow, you can do other things like develop language and architecture, writing and maths, etc. And you hopefully all read this book by Johan Hariri, A Brief History of Humankind, Sapiens. He argues that it was actually the planting of wheat to make bread that made humanity. So wheat eventually actually civilized the human species. But there's another argument which I think is slightly more compelling, and that's Edward Slingerland, who argues that we grew wheat in order to make beer, and we cultivated obviously grapes to make wine. And that is arguably a more compelling argument, not least because, as most of you will probably have accidentally happened upon sometime in your life, being drunk is a very good way of making friends. And making friends with people you don't know is often a good way of spreading the gene pool. And that is why he believes that places like Stonehenge were built to encourage the coming together of different tribes. Because, as I guess most of you know, there was a period when Homo sapiens had we were small in number, and interbreeding could have created serious problems. So we wanted to outbreed, and alcohol is a very good outbreeding medium. But of course it also comes with problems. I've talked about the deaths, but also it's strongly associated with other harms, particularly accidents, violence, etc. And a lot of people, maybe about 15% of people who drink, become addicted. And that is a serious problem because we don't really know how to stop that and how to help them when they are addicted. But most importantly for the talk today, it's a really old technology. In fact, I would argue it is the only technology we use today, that was founded 40,000 years ago when probably sapiens in the Rift Valley of Africa learnt that you could ferment honey to make mead. That was probably the first drink. Of course, they were picking up rotting fruit long before that. So why do we rely on a technology that is that old? And the answer is because no one's really thought about doing anything different. Well, the ones who have thought about it have not managed to convince other people that that's the right way forward. But it's changing now, and the origins of my interest in this came from this government report from the Foresight programme in 2004. That was a very interesting experience for me. I was the medical lead of that programme, looking at the impact of neuroscience on drugs and over the next 25 years. We're getting quite close to the 25th year anniversary of that book now, and most of what we suggested actually hasn't happened, but I'm working on it. And in that programme of essentially doing a lot of brainstorming over the course of a year with various experts in various aspects of science and pharmacology and sociology and anthropology, it became clear that it would never be possible to find an antidote to all the effects of alcohol. It's too promiscuous a drug, and it's too damaging a drug. So we hit on the idea that maybe what we need to do is replace it. And that article in New Scientist came out from that Foresight book. So it makes sense to find a safer alcohol if you can. How can you do that? Well, you can explore how alcohol works, and then you can hopefully create something to do what we want alcohol to do without the harms. So we want to find a molecule or a substance or a cocktail that mimics the positive effects of alcohol, something that doesn't affect all the bodily systems that alcohol affects inevitably when you drink, before even it gets to your brain. And we don't want it metabolized to something as toxic as acetaldehyde, which, as the chemists here know, is only one carbon removed from formaldehyde, and formaldehyde is what we preserve dead bodies in. Now, alcohol is very promiscuous. It targets almost every cell in the body. It targets almost every cell in the brain. This image of the brain is color-coded. Red is bad. There's a lot of red, isn't there? Black is very bad. That's death. And but the green bits are good. And the green bits are the impact of alcohol in the frontal cortex, which is the most recently evolved part of the human brain. It's the part of the brain which makes you as scientists and creators and visionaries as clever as you are. But it's also where we think about our relationship with other people, where we get thought loops about not being good enough, not being clever enough, not being attractive enough. And alcohol dissolves those, and it dissolves them to make us sociable and convivial through enhancing the effects of GABA in those brain regions. So it's pretty straightforward. All you've got to do is just do that, just enhance GABA in your frontal cortex, and all be well with your party tonight. But GABA is very important. It's the main off switch of the brain, and therefore it's not a trivial exercise to target switching off GABA just where you want it, because if you switch it off or switch it on elsewhere in the brain, all sorts of problems will happen. You'll fall asleep, you'll fall over, you'll slur your words, etc. So I just want to give you a very... are any of you neuroscientists? Okay. Well, correct me if I'm wrong then. But the brain is a very simple kind of machine. It's a machine. It's about 80 billion on-off switches, and the on switch is glutamate, and the off switch is GABA, and GABA basically controls the activity of the brain through stopping neurons firing. And everything else is all the other things that you hear about: dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline. They do lots of monitoring and modulating the effects of these core on-off switches. But so they set a tone, but they don't drive brain function in the same way. So glutamate's the on switch of the brain. Everything you have heard, seen, thought in the course of the last 10 minutes of my talking here, everything has been laid down and analysed, and if you've remembered any of it, laid down through glutamate. Glutamate basically is the on switch, as I've said. But the problem is too much glutamate makes you anxious, and if you have even more glutamate, you have seizures. And so over the last few 100 million years of evolution, every time brains, whether they're mammalian brains or other brains, release glutamate, they almost always release GABA to counteract the effects of glutamate. And your brain is wired so it's impossible just to release glutamate, otherwise you would all be dead while you were babies. And so activating GABA then dampens down the effect of glutamate, and you walk a tightrope. Your brain is continually walking this tightrope between too much excitation, too much inhibition. It's quite challenging to keep it perfectly balanced. And the problem with alcohol is that alcohol potentiates, it enhances the effects of GABA, and it blocks the effects of glutamate. And that's why, if you take too much of it, you die. And that's what happened to Amy Winehouse. And most of us, when we heard she died, we presumed it was some exotic drug, maybe, or maybe just the heroin she was addicted to. But in fact, it was alcohol that killed her, because she was an alcoholic as well as a heroin addict. And she was clean. She stopped taking both. She met the criteria for recovery that the government at the time set, which is 6 weeks of not using a drug. But it was that not using alcohol that killed her, because it was very easy for her to relapse to alcohol. She walked down the street, went to the corner shop, bought a litre of vodka and drank it. And she died of alcohol poisoning because she'd lost tolerance. If she'd actually carried on drinking, she wouldn't have died with the blood alcohol level that killed her, but because she'd lost tolerance, in the same way as heroin addicts lose tolerance and they die when they start using again when they leave prison, she died when she relapsed to alcohol. I've already mentioned this, but I just want to emphasise that there's a huge amount of literature that suggests that enhancing GABA in your brain is quite critical to producing social bonding, which is what most of us want to do. Humans, we are so successful. We are just, we control the globe. Eventually we'll control Mars if people are stupid enough to go there, but we can control anything we want because we work together in enormously powerful teams. So we're very, very successful socially, but we're actually not very good at being sociable. And that's why alcohol still exists, because alcohol allows us to fulfill that social role that overcomes the social anxiety that most of us have. So a few years ago, I set up this company called GABA Labs in order to make GABA acting agents that would mimic the effects of alcohol, on the supposition that these would be of interest, they'd be popular, and wise people would start using them because they would like to live longer than as they would if they were drinking alcohol. So that's the plan. It's a small company, but we've been quite successful because we've linked with various academic groups who know a lot about the different aspects of GABA and how you can make molecules or find molecules in nature which will mimic the effects. If you want to, you can read. That's a free download. There's a paper we wrote a couple of years ago outlining the thinking behind what we do, which is targeting both synthetic molecules and also botanical molecules to mimic the effects of alcohol and avoid the unwanted effects of alcohol. Now, I said at the beginning it's complicated, and it turns out that the complication is the opportunity. So GABA is an enormously important neurotransmitter, and there are at least 15 different subtypes of GABA receptors in the brain, and they're all made up of these 5 separate proteins which come together to form this it's like a bracelet which sits in a cell membrane and allows ions to transfer across the cell membrane, and that is how the brain is calmed, by opening of the hole in the middle of that complex. But there's 15 subunits, come in different families. There's alphas, there's betas, there's gammas, there's deltas, there's pi's, and they are distributed in different parts of the brain. And that allows us to potentially target parts of the brain where ones might be overexpressed or highly expressed, and have a specific action. This is just a cladogram of the evolution of these different receptors, and they show there are some large proportions of them have particular subtypes. But even the ones where you've only got 3 or 4% of the whole total of a particular complex, there are more of those than there are dopamine receptors in the human brain. So GABA is the critical controlling transmitter. So what we need to do is we need to target the subtypes which allow us to relax. And we know from, certainly from rodent studies, that there are very specific localizations of particular alpha receptor subtypes in different parts of the brain. And there are 4 main alpha subtypes. They're listed here. You can see they have very different distributions. Hot is more. I won't go to all the different brain regions, but you can see that they're quite different. And they're particularly of particular interest are the alpha 2 and alpha 3 because they gate the cortex. The cortex is this is a rat brain. The cortex is a lump on the top. So those GABA subtypes gate activity in the cortex. The top one, the alpha 1 subtype, is all through the cortex. And that's why you fall asleep if you take a sedative, or some of you fall asleep if you take alcohol, because you basically wipe out brain function. And that's what anesthetics like propofol do. But you can target the smallest, more rare subtypes without producing sedation. You can produce relaxation. And we're now beginning to use PET scanning to identify these subtypes in different parts of the brain. This is the alpha 5 subtype, which is a lot of relevance to addiction, but not particular relevance to what we are talking about today. But I'm just showing you the technology can be extrapolated to humans. So this process has actually met with quite a lot of interest from cartoonists. I think you kind of know you're on the right track when the Times will make a cartoon about your drink. So this is the building up, I think, to the 2015 election. It's interesting how historic it is. You see on the left-hand side there, UKIP, unfiltered small beer made from Farage. And then you've got Miliband, and you've got George Osborne's Housing Bubbly. You've got Blue Orange Juice, which has got something to do with Nick Clegg, and you've got Mr. Cameron's Absinthe. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of amusing. I wasn't going to invent those drinks, right? But if I did, you would have to drink them very responsibly. But in reality, we've been progressing this in 2 ways. We've been developing botanical drinks that have the effect we want, and we've also been making small molecules that target those particular GABA subtypes and do it in a way which mimics the time course and the efficacy of alcohol. And the botanicals are here now. Some of you may have seen them. They make fantastic Christmas presents, by the way. And as I said, if I'd realised you were going to have a party afterwards, I would have got some sent. But there's always next year. These are botanical spirits. They are basically made up of a host of herbs which are in the food chain. They've been in the food chain since before 1997, which means they've been grandfathered in as food safe. They contain some herbs which have molecules which enhance GABA, and they contain other herbs we put in there which have molecules that facilitate the uptake and the penetration of those particular molecules into the body and to the brain. And they have various different flavors, and they can be mixed with any mixer you want to give you a pleasant drink. And we thought, well, that's it, job done. Anyway, we've actually got an alcohol alternative. It works. I can show you. I'm going to show you in a minute that it works. So do we need to do more? And the answer is, it turns out we do, because it turns out most people actually are quite happy drinking what they drink, and they don't really want to explore a different kind of drink that's got a funny Italian name like Sentia and looks different and tastes different. So we've had to revise our thinking as we've gone along, but at least we have achieved the goal. We have it out there. It's available in the UK, in America, and also in Europe. Now, the scientists amongst you will say, well, prove it works on GABA. So we started to develop research to address that question. And we began by using mammalian tissue, where we know the effect of alcohol is mediated through GABA, and this is tension in a mouse gut. And you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the gut. As you know, your guts have rhythmic activity. They're pumping away all the time, making food move through it. You put alcohol on, there's a bit of relaxation. The actual magnitude of the excursion goes down. There's a transient reduction in tone, and then it comes back. On the right-hand side, you see Sentia. Sentia massively reduces tone and produces a prolonged attenuation of tonic activity. And many people describe that. Many people say one of the nice things about drinking Sentia is it actually relaxes your gut. When you lie in bed, many people have that gut tension before they fall asleep, and Sentia eliminates that through GABA. We know that's through GABA because we can reverse a significant proportion of the effect in the gut by blocking GABA receptors. So we're pretty confident we're enhancing GABA in the gut. But that isn't where we're really targeting the effect. We're targeting the effect in the brain. Now, it's difficult to study specific receptor subtypes in whole animal brain. Animal research has virtually died. Many universities have got rid of animal facilities. In fact, the university we started working in, so those gut bath studies I showed you in the previous slide were done in the University of Portsmouth. They no longer have an animal facility. That facility ended last year. In fact, I think on the whole south coast of England now, there's only maybe 2 universities that have actually animal facilities. So it's difficult to do that work. But what you can do, and this is one advantage of modern technology, is you can mimic a mammalian brain, or at least a mammalian receptor. You can actually make a frog or a toad oocyte express a particular receptor subtype you want, and in that oocyte you can then do voltage clamping on the specific receptor subtype. So you can actually then invent molecules or find out whether your molecules work on the subtypes you want to target. And that we've been working with Jerome Swinney in the University of Portsmouth to do that. So this is human RNA expressing specific human receptor subtype in an oocyte. And you can see on the left-hand image there, you put GABA on, the receptor opens, ions flow into the cell. You can measure the change in ion flow with the voltage clamping, and you can show that molecules we've invented enhance that effect. And here is one of our lead molecules. So this is a dose response curve. The one that's going up is what we want. We want to enhance activity through that particular target. And we don't want to enhance activity through the unwanted target, the blobs. We want to separate the impact of molecules to produce relaxation, but not sedation or ataxia. And we've begun to achieve that with this particular molecule and others that we're developing. So we can make molecules that fit the purpose. What we need to do now is obviously get them into humans. But we can also use those humanized oocytes and ask the question, well, do our botanical drinks do the same? And the answer is yes. The botanical drinks also enhance GABA function in those oocytes. That's the red bar. So there's GABA. You add Sentia, you get a bigger effect. And if you block GABA receptors by cooking, you reduce the effect. So some of the effect of Sentia, at least, is mediated through a particular subtype of GABA receptor. Well, what about humans? Well, the good thing is that now Sentia is available and people are buying it. There are scientists that work on it. And this guy, Alex Shaw, from University of Exeter, rang me up a year or so ago and said, did I know that Sentia changes the EEG? And I said, oh, wow, how do you know that? And he said, I've done it. And I said, well, that was very kind of you, you know. So I sent him a few more bottles as a reward. And EEG is essentially a measure of electrical activity in the brain, or it's a signature of the different firing rates of different pyramidal cells in the brain. You're all familiar with it, I think. And this is the first data that our drink changes EEG function. And what you see here, if it's red, there's more power in that frequency band, and the frequency bands are stacked from left slow frequency to right high frequency. So there are areas of the brain where there's increased power in a particular frequency, and the alpha frequency in the middle, the alpha, that's one of the key driving frequencies of the brain. It's the frequency in which consciousness is in part regulated. So you can see that Sentia has an impact to enhance alpha frequency, and that probably explains why it makes me more relaxed. And it also reduces, in a different part of the brain, it reduces gamma frequency, the high frequency, and that probably also reduces, as a measure of it reducing stress. And alcohol is different, and that's really important to us because we don't want to mimic alcohol because we don't want the problems of alcohol. We want our drinks to be different, and alcohol has different effects on different frequencies in different brain regions. And we're now in a process. We've just been awarded a BBSRC grant with Alex to take this field further forward over the next 3 years. So I mentioned that the world was interested in a new way of thinking about drinking, but most people weren't. Most people wanted to carry on drinking what they're drinking. So we decided to bite the bullet and make drinks that they wanted to drink rather than make them change their habits. So we've now taken the botanical components of Sentia, refined it, and put it into beers. So there's a stout and there's a IPA. So these are beers that have been made with alcohol. Alcohol is extracted, so they're alcohol free, and you put in the botanical ingredient to get an effect. And we've also now launched Cask, which is a whiskey equivalent, and it's turned out to be rather popular. It's probably the first functional alcohol-free whiskey. There are plenty of other alcohol-free whiskies, but this is the first one that actually does something. And I want to make a special mention of Helen, who's here. She's there with a checkerboard on her. So she approached us a couple of years ago and said, look, I know quite a lot about how you analyze things. And we said, oh, good. I can help you work out what's in your botanicals. So with a master's student, she ran some of these HPLC traces for us to identify molecules that are already which were in the botanical ingredients. This particular one is, I think, passion flower, and so she's allowed us to look at the magnitude of the different elements, but also she's discovered some new molecules which we didn't know existed in that particular extract. No one had found them before. So we're building up a body of knowledge about what the actual key ingredients are in the botanicals that do what we want them to do to mimic alcohol. And maybe we will end up being able to refine some of those to make a more specific small molecule, individual molecule, rather than a cocktail. And that would have some advantages because putting a lot of botanical ingredients into a drink is quite challenging in terms of, particularly in keeping it clear, which is very difficult. What about the synthetic? What about making the molecules that a single small molecule that you could put into drinks in the same way as Intel was the chip that went into computers. Our vision is that Arca-Rel will be the small molecule that we would license to any drinks company in the world, so they could make any drink they like that would be functional but not have alcohol in it. And we've got molecules. I showed you the function of one of them. We've got about 3 lead molecules. In fact, we're ready to go into humans. We've got them patented. The problem is, to get a new molecule into humans, you have to go through a pathway which is very similar to the pharmaceutical pathway. And that costs a lot of money. So I'm disappointed that Mr. Wharton left, because I was hoping that the regional government here might want to fund it, because we could certainly reduce quite a lot of problems in Liverpool and Manchester if people were drinking our drink rather than ethanol. But anyway, any of you rich, see me afterwards, please. But we're ready to go once we've got funding. And my own personal view is, I would have thought this surely should be an initiative that governments would really want to endorse. I mean, we're pumping billions into cleaner energy. Why don't we try to deal with the problem which costs us 30 billion? Alcohol costs the UK economy 30 billion a year. Would it be, all I'm asking for is 3 million. That's quite a good return, I would have thought. So I'm going to stop now and I'll take questions. Thank you very much.
Two or three questions. I'm just going to do one now. We've got one here, one over there.
Hi, my name is Deborah. That was super interesting, thank you. My question is more in relation to health. So, one of the slides you showed looked at gut function.
Yeah.
And at first I was thinking, why would you want to reduce gut function? Because obviously we need good gut function.
Yeah.
But I wondered if there's potentially any other uses for this product that you're creating other than social alcohol. Like, could it help with gut disease, things like that, irritable bowel disease, things like that?
Well, it could, yes. I mean, a lot of people with anxiety disorders have, we've all had butterflies in our stomach, haven't we? We've all had that kind of anxiety. A lot of people have chronic anxiety in their gut, so it could help with that. But also the other thing we're learning, which we didn't know about, 2004 when that first paper was published, or the first book was published, we didn't even know there was a microbiome. Now we know there's a hell of a lot of different bugs in the microbiome, and many of them actually use GABA to promote growth and to and it's almost certain that the gut bugs releasing GABA are affecting your gut as well. So that's a whole new area we're beginning to explore, whether we can use our molecules to enhance gut health as well as relax people. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Isabel. I'm from the Royal Society, and I think I have two questions. First is about GABA supplements, because I think they've been on the market for. I'm Russian, and in Russia we have so-called nootropic pharmaceutical supplements. And as a typical Russian, I'm used to think that this is like not a real science, that there's no any. Because if you check those supplements, you will never find any research in English, you know. And I was always thinking that this is something like snake oil, but your presentation is like eye-opening for me. And I was just wondering what do you think about it? What do you think about supplements? And another question was about I think many people I hear here and there that people stop drinking as much as they used to.
Yeah.
And I think empirically I feel the same, because I see that younger generation drink less and less. And I was just wondering what's your take on this?
Well, I think they're smarter than the older generation, aren't they? That's who we're targeting. We want them to have a choice. In fact, it's interesting that the Sentia are sold to two groups. They're sold to older people who know that drinking's killing them and they want to drink less, and they're sold to young people who don't want to start. So we're actually that. Surprisingly, our innovation has paralleled, or fortuitously been paralleled by a social change in young people drinking less. In terms of the supplements, yes, so GABA itself doesn't get into the brain, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, but there are GABA receptors in the gut. So GABA, if you take GABA in as a single molecule, you will almost certainly have some impact on GABA receptors in the gut, and you may very likely to change the microbiome by activating GABA receptors on some of the bugs. So it is quite plausible that GABA itself as a supplement will do things. It's not well established, but it is plausible. It's also very sweet and unpleasant, but apart from that, that's not. Some people like that. No, I don't.
You have me at no hangover. Through it. But serious question around if in the future we got rid of alcoholic drinks as we knew it, and we had alcoholic drinks that were actually based on this. How do we manage that? For example, now we've got a lot of legislation like driving, drink drive limits, drug drive limits. So how would we, if we were recreating some effects alcohol, how would we then manage those with work, with driving and stuff like that?
Well, you have to use functional tests. I mean, of course, driving won't be a problem because Musk will be driving us everywhere in his car as well. So that's not a problem. One of the things what's really I didn't have time to explain in great detail, but our drinks are all targeted to have a plateau effect and not to exceed it. So you cannot get drunk, you won't fall over, you won't get addicted, you won't have hangovers. So if we were to regulate the future of drinking in a way which stipulated those criteria in the same way as we do, for instance, with the strength of things like paracetamol, we could almost eliminate all those problems. And you're from Wales, right? So I'm very happy to talk to the Welsh Government about brewing this stuff and making it in Wales. Right? Thank you. You've even got a pharmaceutical company. You've got Dragon Pharmaceuticals working in glutamate.
We do.
Just spun off, yes.
Spun off. Really good news story.
In fact, yes. In fact, two of the chemists and the pharmacologist, are on our advisory board as well.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely fascinating. I know we all have so many more questions, so I think while we're at lunch, maybe we can just queue up next to David. We can take them one by one. We are running a little bit behind, but it is lunchtime. Very exciting, I know. So the plan is, after we'll all be walking over to lunch. I think it's in the building next door. I'm following Ballet leader. When we come back, we'll be going back into our breakout sessions. If you are in the health breakout session, that will be in the lecture theatre here. The energy breakout session will be on the first floor, room 114. And the AI breakout session will be on the second floor in room 201.
But there'll be people around to show you where all that is.
There will be people around to show you where that is. So that's health in here, energy 114, and AI in 201. For the moment though, let's go grab some food. That will be starting at 1:30. So we ask you to be back in those rooms 1:30. Thank you very much.
Not a disaster. Actually, it's all fine.
Very sorry.
No, it's all fine. What is true though is what you don't know is that one of the speakers for the afternoon panel has phoned in and said, I really can't come in person. Can I join online? And to which I've said, let's pretend you can. So be ready, but we'll send you some instruction.
Okay. I will talk to them.
It was one of the many. Screens you had open. Oh yeah, you've now just got him above the button that you need. Can you just move? Yeah. Right, it says end stream. Okay. If that says end stream,
it's still streaming.
Then maybe it's still streaming. Let me just go and log it in and see if we. You see. That was that. I'm going to. At the moment, it doesn't look like it is, but that may be because it's just locked. Let me just refresh it. Can't be. Sorry, I have no Wi-Fi here. I have to tag off my phone.
The problem we got is if you want to stream Zoom at two different setups, because we've basically got the camera through OBS doing the stream, and then Zoom will then want to use this camera to link, and yet then you've not linked Zoom with the. You see what I mean? You'd have to then select a window in OBS for Zoom to actually use that instead of using the camera direct. So it's a lot of messing around, to be honest.
Yeah, but this is what
it's very complicated sort of. You're actually using
right.
3, 4.
So the good news is we're now live streaming, so that's great.
Okay.
So we can start again and have our first speaker who has no slides, and then hopefully after the first speaker you can change it over to the guy from Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can try
it should
that.
take 10 minutes here, the first speech.
And then after he's spoken, we need to go back to the live camera again, but then we'll have some slides which are on the
which are on this computer. Can we just check if the slides are here? And
yeah,
if
just
we go down.
Go down a little bit.
Yeah, they are here. Yeah, so if we go up, to, yeah. Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
so
I don't think.
I think from that time.
Yeah, I can't see we're going to. Well, we might.
No,
I wouldn't bother with putting those up now.
Okay.
I would just use the camera now.
Yeah,
we can get that as a slideshow actually set. F5, and you can do Alt Tab. So we go into
this one, yeah. So
you want that live on here?
Yeah, so yeah, because there is the first person speaking, yeah? Or
This one, sorry, is the first one.
No, the online is second.
Right, so you want...
So we want just
there's no one talking on the... no one presenting on the first one.
No, just talking.
There is no power.
Okay.
Right, okay. I'll get people to join us then.
Yeah.
So view,
yeah, thank you
I'll
very
do
much,
full
Brian.
screen.
Thank you.
Just hide that. Can you?
I'll just close it. Can you stay for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
That creates assumptions about the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know he's
His house is bad. And then once we've been there,
Is Shamari online? Yeah, okay, great. Are we? Do we look ready? What's up? Hello everyone. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you. Is my voice being picked up fine on the mic? Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us for the afternoon session. So we are going to be talking about the barriers to successful science, technology, and innovation. My name's Lauren Taylor, and I work at the UK Space Agency, and I'm part of the Foundation Future Leaders 2025 cohort as well. So today we're going to be joined by Natalia Zavina-James, Deputy Head of Space Exploration Programme at the UK Space Agency. We've got Shamari Lewis-Wilson, who's online, and he's the Senior Manager, Research Culture and Communities at the Wellcome Trust. And then Simon Hepworth, Director of Knowledge Exchange at Research England. I'm going to pass over to them to give a brief introduction to themselves. So, Natalia.
Thank you, Lauren, and hi everyone. It's great to be here this afternoon. So I'm Natalia Zavina-James from the UK Space Agency, and as Lauren has already said, I'm the Deputy Head of Space Exploration. So I don't know what Lauren's already told you about the space exploration, all good things. But we exist to use space to boost the economy, make scientific discoveries, and protect the planet and space. In the exploration team, I look after the policy and planning aspects of our programme. So it means working with government strategies to ensure that we're aligned to wider UK goals, but also making sure that government care about the missions we're doing, because not everything can be strategically aligned to everything, but it doesn't mean it's not important. I also work with the European Space Agency, or ESA, to make sure that they're spending our subscription money wisely. So we deliver a lot through ESA. Space is quite difficult to do by yourself. And they have a lot of other member states that they also have to answer to. So, you know, busy job. I spend a lot of time thinking about low Earth orbit, the Moon and Mars, which actually is quite a privilege, I think, all things considered. I'm very lucky. In terms of my background, I used to work at the Bioscience and Biotechnology Research Council as a portfolio manager. And before that, I was a PhD student at St Andrews, where I did isotope geochemistry, specifically studying the biological regulation of Earth's early atmosphere through copper and nickel isotopes. I'm fundamentally a geologist by training. So yeah, there's a bit of context, hopefully enough to go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, Shamari. Hopefully you can hear us and you're connected. We're just gonna, if you can just bear with us just 1 second, we will stream your slides so that you can introduce yourself as well.
Great, thank you. Let me know when you can see me and my content.
You'll need to share your content, Shamari.
Oh, sorry, I haven't shared the content yet, of course. That'll be the easy thing to do. Great. Hi everybody, thanks so much for having me, and apologies I couldn't be there in person. The delights of being with a small human who's addicted to licking absolutely everything at the moment, so apologies for that. But my name is Shemida Sawson. I'm recently got a new job title as the Equitable Research Ecosystems Lead for the UK at Wellcome. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I guess, Wellcome's work and its relevance to the topics discussed during this panel. It won't take too long, but I'll just give a quick overview of kind of like who we are and what we do. If you don't know Wellcome and why we care about equity and research,
I'm so sorry, Shamari. I'm so sorry. You're coming through in the room, and you're not coming through on the live stream. And we're just going to pause you very briefly, so that everyone watching online can also see the exciting slides that you've got.
Okay,
no problem. Apologies, folks. Thank you.
It's frozen the OBS. It's frozen OBS, so
I don't want to delay things. If it's easier, I can just kind of talk through the major points of what I was going to say. That's easier.
Yeah, would you mind, Shamari? That would be great.